Chapter 702. Gold-Seeking Rat. Reverie _ Hen Yi. What Hu Niu caught in her hand was a furry little thing, somewhat like a bamboo rat, only with a different color. Its body was plump, with 4 short limbs and a long tail. If this animal was black, it probably would appear more terrifying, but with its white pelt and pink claws, on top of a pair of eyes that almost took up 1/3 of its face, this guy appeared very endearingly silly. The little guy was struggling desperately to escape from Hu Niu's hand, but it was troubled by short limbs and just struggled in vain, squeaking in panic. Hu Niu began to drool and said, "Grilled or boiled? Grilled is more aromatic, boiled is fresher. Sigh. Why's there only one, making things so difficult for Niu? You can't eat it." Xu Xian, Wenren Qian, and Li Zixian all shouted at the same time. Such a cute little thing, who would be willing to? "Why?" puzzled Hu Niu said, while looking vigilantly at the others. "You guys want to snatch it?" "Humph. Niu's no vegetarian, Niu's down to fight." Ling Han was curious and said, "Could this little guy be the thief from earlier?" "Great, daring to frame your Uncle Rabbit, slaughter and eat it," the rabbit said in an aggressive manner. "Damn rabbit, talk nonsense again. Better believe I'll slaughter you first." Wenren Qian threatened. "All right, Niu wants to eat rabbit meat." Hu Niu immediately targeted the rabbit again. Ling Han waved his hand and made Hu Niu bring the little thing over. He looked at the round and fat guy by tossing and turning it, making the little guy quite embarrassed, even using its small claws to cover its groin. Pooh, it actually spat out a small piece of metal, completely blue, emitting a translucent sparkling hue. It used 2 front claws to clasp the metal and stared attentively at Ling Han as if to ingratiate with him. "All your saliva, at least be particular about gifting it," Ling Han said with a smile, but he was immediately visibly moved. "This is a precious 8th-tier metal, Jade Sea Azure metal." Everyone was surprised. A fat rat actually spat out an 8th-tier rare metal. This was very surprising. Could it be a gold-seeking rat?" the rabbit said in shock. According to the legends, this living spirit has special sensory abilities towards rare metals, being able to sense metal buried even several li underground. Gold-seeking rat. Everyone shook their heads, showing that they'd never heard of this name. "Rabbit, is that made up?" Xu Xian said with a smile. "Pa, don't think that you can treat Uncle Rabbit unfairly because you're a bit prettier." The rabbit stamped its feet. "You guys haven't heard of it before, because there are pathetically few gold-seeking rats. Although they don't have any strong powers, they are definitely scarcer than true dragons and true phoenixes. It can be said that they're valuable treasure even in the divine realm." Everyone was finally moved. This fat and round guy was actually a tall, handsome, rich 2-level. The gold-seeking rat looked at Ling Han with an ingratiating expression. It felt the greatest terror toward Hu Niu, and truly like a rat encountering a cat, even its reactions weren't keen, or else, with its speed, normal people couldn't possibly catch it. But this human could subdue Hu Niu, naturally making it fawn on Ling Han. Whether or not it could escape the fate of going in the grill or the boiling pot was completely dependent on Ling Han. Its 2 small claws clasped the Jade Sea Azure metal, rocking it as if presenting a gift. Ling Han couldn't help but smile and let down the gold-seeking rat, taking the Jade Sea Azure metal and causally wiping away the saliva this little guy left. Zilu, the big white rat, hurriedly took to its heels. It might look fat and round, like it would pant in a few steps, but its speed was surprisingly fast. Fleeing shortly, it disappeared without a trace, ridiculously fast. Everyone was taken aback, and they finally realized they were tricked by an old rat. Who could have thought that it looked endearingly silly in Hu Niu's hands, but was agile to this degree? Simply an agile damned fatty. Ling Han thought about Ma Duobao, who was also a damn fatty yet extremely agile. "Niu's grilled meat," Hu Niu cried out. She just decided how to eat it, but the food ran away. Ling Han laughed and said, "This large white rat has great use. The next time we catch it, let's keep and raise it." Hu Niu pouted. She really wanted to eat, so what could she do? Her gaze turned to the rabbit, her large eyes glowing even more. The rabbit instinctively covered its butt in shock and cried out, "Little girl, what do you want to do? I'm warning you, don't have any ideas about Uncle Ra. It screamed as it was already bitten on the butt by Hunyo. Everyone continued to eat. In a short while, Hunyo suddenly laughed loudly and raised both arms, cupping a fat and round large white rat in her hands. What else was it if not that gold-seeking rat? This time, it was caught red-handed. This large white rat's claws clasped a piece of meat and a part of its mouth bulged out, apparently from having shoved in too much food. It used its innocent eyes to look at every and it was adorable. Everyone couldn't help but smile and start to laugh. I've seen a foolish one, but foolish to this degree. This gold-seeking rat is quite a miracle. Humans die in pursuit of wealth, and birds die in pursuit of food. How truly fitting. This is definitely a gluttonous rat. Earlier, it smelled the aroma and ran over, and being caught once, it still hasn't learned its lesson, falling twice in the same place. Hearing everyone speak, the large white rabbit embarrassedly used its claws to cover its eyes as if its face was going red. Ling Han laughed loudly, grabbed the large white thing again, and said, "Fatty, follow me in the future. I'll guarantee you'll have enough good wine and food, and as for you, just display your talent and find rare metal for me." The large white rat squeaked and gesticulated with its hands and feet as if protesting. "I just ate a few pieces of your meat, and you want to make this rat sell itself. You dare not to agree?" Hunyo moved closer, and revealed a vicious look. The large white rat was immediately scared stiff as its tail suddenly straightened and its four limbs upright. Its entire body was rigid, actually being scared to the point of passing out. Pooh! Everyone laughed loudly. This rat was too hilarious. It was a cowardly rat that actually consecutively came to steal food, and it was a daring rat that was frightened unconscious 5 stars for its acting cute. Xiu, but at this moment, the large white rat took advantage of Ling Han's carelessness and fled like a wisp of smoke. T. Everyone's smiles instantly froze, having been tricked once again by the large white rat. Ling Han took out large amounts of food, and said, "I don't believe it. This fatty will definitely appear again." Everyone shook their heads. As gluttonous as that gold-seeking rat was, it wouldn't make the same mistake thrice, right? As expected, a night passed, and the large white rat didn't appear again. It was early morning, and the change from day to night was almost done in an instant. The sky full of stars and the moon disappeared at the same time, and that large fireball rose into the sky. Although Ling Han thought constantly of that gold-seeking rat, there wasn't any time to waste now, so he moved forward with everyone. Chapter 703. Submission. Reverie _ Henyi. They all spent the next day in hiding. Although there weren't many beasts here, each one was extremely powerful, starting out at the deity transformation tier, and heaven tier ones would appear frequently, so they could only make a detour. Perhaps there were also shattering void tier beings that just hadn't revealed their presence yet. Due to constant hiding and circling, they didn't make much progress on their way throughout the day. The sun set and the moon rose again, and everyone stopped once again to rest and reorganize. "Haha, Nyo caught it again!" Hunyo suddenly shouted joyously, grabbing the white and fat rat with her hand. This large white rat looked pitifully at everyone as if lamenting why it was so gluttonous, walking into a trap again. Ling Han laughed loudly and took the gold-seeking rat. This time, he directly stored it into the Black Tower, and then separated a part of his divine sense to go in. Once the gold-seeking rat was free, it obviously fled in disarray, sniffing with its small nose, and then looking rapaciously at the endless medicinal farms in the Black Tower. It actually fed on metal, and the more precious the metal the more powerful it could become. However, this one was different. It indeed ate gold and metals, which could strengthen it, but it was also gluttonous and liked to eat spirit medicine. Now it was even in love with grilled meat, chicken soup, and so on. So much spirit medicine, it was going to eat to its heart's content. However, as it moved, it surprisingly discovered that it fell into the hands of that human. "Fatty, you can't escape from the palm of my hand," Ling Han said with a smile, loosening his hand again and said, "Run again." The gold-seeking rat was strongly resilient and immediately took to its heels again, even determined to eat everything here clean so as to ridicule this human. However, in a while, it fell into Ling Han's hand again. It was confused. This human speed was clearly not as fast as its own speed, and it had the natural ability to flee into the ground because it was able to feed on metal. Its teeth were also the finest, and whatever was bitten would be broken. Opening a path with its teeth, it should have run away smoothly. Escape again. This time, it dug down in a rush, attempting to flee through the earth, but after digging for at least 10 li, a human face suddenly appeared in front of it. Who else was it if it wasn't that man? This time, it was truly frightened, straightening its tail. With a paw, it flipped over and lay down with its big white belly facing the sky, looking like it had been frightened to death. I'm not an adorable thing like you. You think I'd be deceived by you? Ling Han laughed loudly, picked up the gold-seeking rat by its tail and said, Don't feign death. Look, such a large place with spirit medicine planted everywhere and all sorts of beasts with fresh quality meat. He paused shortly and carried on patiently. How about it, as long as you follow me, I'll provide spirit medicine and as much delicious meat you as you like. Gee. The fat rat came to life at once, standing on its hind legs, and squeaked at Ling Han as if bargaining. I can't understand what you're saying, but so long as you nod whether you're willing to follow me or not? Ling Han let out a devilish alluring sound. The fat rat struggled and finally closed its small claws in a manner of submission. All right, you're one of mine from now. My rat, I'll give you a name. Since you're so fat and like someone, it would be too unreasonable not to take advantage of it to mock him, Ling Han thought. He then said, From now on, you're called by Duo Bao, nickname, Fatty or Small White. The gold-seeking rat squeaked in remonstration. It wasn't fat. This was called sensual. Ling Han brought the gold-seeking rat outside with a smile and said, Little guy is now one of us. Its name is by Duo Bao and nicknames Fatty and Small White. Xu Xiu Ran immediately burst into laughter. She knew Ling Han did it in bad taste, yet didn't know how Ma Duo Bao would look if he met this gold-seeking rat in the future. Brother Ling truly has surprising fortune, being able to obtain a treasure like the gold-seeking rat, Wan Ren Qian exclaimed. It was attracted by Ling Han's food and caught by Hu Niu. Ling Han subdued it, so how could she have the shame to ask to share the benefits? Ling Han smiled. In this life, his luck was indeed great. Obtaining 3 mystical powers was a proof thereof. In reality, his luck in the previous life was also not bad for him to bump into the Black Tower. The level of this divine tool, impossible to fathom. The gold-seeking rat climbed onto Ling Han's shoulder, squeaking and gesticulating. It meant that it had eaten secretly just now and didn't have enough. Now, it was time for it to eat to its heart's content. Ling Han casually took food to feed this fatty. Hu Niu still couldn't hide her rapaciousness and stared at the gold-seeking rat, making the gold-seeking rat break out in a cold sweat as it ate. There seemed to be something terrifying hiding inside this small human, giving the cute rat psychological trauma and deeply hurting its heart. It should be a young rat, the rabbit said. Why do you say that? Everyone asked. Hu Niu said, Yes. It's grown so fat already, it's completely fine to eat. It can't be small. A mature gold-seeking rat would have golden fur. It has white fur only when they're young, the rabbit explained. The gold-seeking rat's ability to find rare metal is correlated with its age. The older it is, the higher the tier of metal it can find. So, this was still a little guy. No wonder it was so gluttonous and was fooled time and time again. It couldn't be helped, being young and ignorant. Xu Xiu Ran's maternal instinct broke out as she went to hug the gold-seeking rat, and said, Don't know where Small White's parents went, actually throwing away such a little baby. Hu Niu drooled and said, There's 2 more big ones. Niu's not craving at all. Haha, its parents might be long dead, the rabbit said. Gold-seeking rats are very special, born by spawn, and if the deposited egg doesn't have suitable conditions, it's not strange if it doesn't hatch in 100 millennia, or 1,000 millennia. This made Hu Niu greatly disappointed as her hopes for a new taste were dashed. After eating and drinking enough, everyone began to rest, cultivating a little, ridding the exhaustion during the day, and preparing for a possible battle encounter tomorrow. The gold-seeking rat was endearingly silly as expected. When it slept, its 4 feet faced the sky and it let out a large snoring sound. Unbearably noisy, it was thrown into the Black Tower by Ling Han, and finally everyone had some quiet. The second day, everyone set out. Ling Han let the gold-seeking rat out so that it could find rare metals. No kidding, this fatty really was no slouch. In the short time of a day, it gave Ling Han 3 pieces of rare metal. 1 was 4th tier and 2 were 5th tier, and although it wasn't all that precious, it was all for free. Another night passed, and the day came as usual. This was already the 4th day since they'd entered here. When they were walking, they heard a sharp cry as a dark cloud appeared in the sky, quickly overshadowing them. Everyone looked up and saw that it wasn't a dark cloud, but a huge eagle, dark green all over and without feathers, covered in scales not unlike a green armor, emitting a threatening chill. Everyone's hair stood up because this was a supreme existence at the shattering void tier, and its stare could kill them several hundred times. Chapter 704. A Strange Medicine Treasure. Reverie _ Henyi. Fortunately, this green eagle didn't care about them, the nobodies, and fluttered its wings as it flew by. In its claws, a golden rhinoceros the size of a small mountain hung with its body in tatters, bleeding all the way. This 8 treasures gold rhinoceros was in the heaven tier. The golden rhinoceros's blood sprayed down, an absolute calamity for the living spirits below. The blood contained a heaven tier beast's baleful chi, and even deity transformation tier elites would be shocked to death when coming in contact with it. Such blood was precious medicine, but at least over 10 deity transformation tier elites cooperating were needed to remove the baleful chi to collect it. No matter whether it was Yao Huiyu, Jia Ming, or Xu Xiu Ran, when encountering such a situation, they could basically do nothing but shake their heads and make a detour. But it was different for Ling Han, for he had the heaven transformation bowl. This treasure was unleashed, and it collected the golden rhinoceros's blood, directly extracting the purest of essence. The medicinal effects would be stronger, yet without the baleful chi. However, no one would dare consume such a precious liquid. Even if it wasn't at the shattering void tier, it was still in high-level heaven tier, and with their current cultivation, whoever ate it would explode. Even a shattering void tier beast has appeared, they exclaimed. This is a female eagle, and might have just given birth to a convocation of small eagles. If one could be raised, then it'll be awe-inspiring in the future, the rabbit suddenly said. Everyone was visibly moved. The tier of beasts depended more on bloodline, and this green eagle had reached the shattering void tier, so its offspring could also reach shattering void tier as long as it was provided with sufficient nutrition. This was the greatest difference between humans and beasts, but in contrast, beasts were also limited by bloodline. If this green eagle wanted to cross over shattering void tier and advance into the divine realm, it would be something almost impossible. Unless it could receive supreme precious medicine and shatter the constraints of bloodline. This was too distant, but raising a shattering void tier beast, just how shocking would its value be? Grilled eagle legs. Hunyo's thoughts were obviously offbeat as her eyes started to light up. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Don't indulge in flights of fancy. A shattering void tier beast's nest is filled with that green eagle's baleful chi, and if we were to go in, we'd be turned into fine dust before seeing the eggs." Hearing him say so, everyone also shook their heads. Right, that was an existence of the shattering void tier, so who could sneak into its nest? Let's go. They continued onwards. After 2 more days, Rock Spirit completely refined the Heart of Stone and advanced into the spiritual infant tier, and it was also high-level spiritual infant tier. This type of worldly spirit was strong to begin with, and it was difficult for it to find rivals in the same tier, being a king amongst kings. With its current battle prowess, it could even rival freaks like Yao Huiyu. Ling Han was extremely pleased. Now the rock spirit was finally a qualified hatchetman again, while Black Tower could also produce 1 rare stone every month, so the rock spirit's speed of improvement should surpass his, becoming more and more gelivable. At this time, the expansive area finally reached an end, and an extremely vast watery area appeared in front. At least, Ling Han couldn't see its end even with the Eye of Truth activated. At the junction of land and water, there was a strange medicinal plant growing. It was 15 meters tall and entirely white, with fruit like a corn cob, but many times larger. That fruit emitted a faint aroma that made people who smelled it relaxed and happy. However, Ling Han's party wasn't the only one that discovered this precious medicine. Many more people discovered it like Jia Ming, who stood on the side with his hands behind his back and wore a beast-like grim smile. Ling Han also saw Yao Huiyu, who was also alone. There was also the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing. They each brought their own team. An adventure like this was the best to foster friendship, and of course the best to destroy it. Yuan Cheng, he was also present. He gave Ling Han a slight nod and evidently honored his promise to respect Ling Han as the boss. What was this precious medicine? Ling Han raised such doubts. He was the alchemy emperor in his former life, and when it came to recognizing spirit medicine, no one would dare say they were first if he said he was second. As for many precious medicines that were already extinct, he'd also seen their appearances in graphical archives. However, he'd never seen nor heard of such a precious medicine. Now, everyone was restraining each other, so a fierce battle didn't unfold. Besides, the precious medicine seemed to be a few days from reaching maturity, which made everyone refrain from clashing fiercely. Ling Han felt it strange. This indeed was a fine precious medicine, the aroma of which proved that it definitely was a top-tier treasure. But why didn't the Flame King and the elites of the 5 great sects collect it earlier in passing? It would be worth it even if one person stayed behind to guard it here. Was there a reason? Ling Han revealed a contemplative look. In his former life, he entered too many historical sites and encountered many dangers, giving him a clear awareness never become obsessed with treasures. Treasures were admittedly good, but they were often associated with danger and traps. There were clearly many powerful beasts entrenched here, yet with a precious medicine placed there openly, why wasn't there a single beast that guarded it? A precious medicine of heaven and earth would often be accompanied by beasts and even emerge because of beasts. Intuition made Ling Han firmly believe that there was a very highly probability that this would be a trap. He told Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing of this suspicion, and called Yuan Changhe to his side, making him obey his command. Yuan Changhe was somewhat unwilling, but he didn't dare to disobey. This fierce person was the one who killed small Saber King. Everyone was still waiting for the moment the precious medicine truly matured, which was the matter of 2 to 3 days. Many more people arrived afterwards. Amongst them was no lack of heaven-tier elites, which made the weaker people sigh. If they'd known elites of this level would appear, they definitely wouldn't have waited so long and just grabbed the precious medicine earlier. Even if it wasn't ripe, it was better than nothing. 3 days later, there were as many as 7 heaven-tier elites, and Ling Han's anxiousness grew greater, because over these few days, he hadn't seen a single beast nearby. One should know that beasts had an extremely strong sense of territory. There were no beasts here, which meant only one thing. There was already a powerful beast here, which made the other beasts view this area as a forbidden land, not daring to set foot on it. Contest for the precious medicine finally started. 7 heaven-tier elites battled fiercely, and the powerful after-effect of the battle made everyone retreat constantly, unable to get close. At this moment, the precious medicine disappeared with a tremble. Everyone was dumbfounded. This precious medicine grew feet? Or, was it someone daring and bold who took advantage to steal the precious medicine while the 7 heaven-tier elites were fighting fiercely? Hong long long the earth began to quake. Pa, a fissure appeared, and then spiderweb-like cracks spread in all directions as if some terrifying existence was about to break through the ground. Chapter 705, Bait. Reverie _ Henyi. Pang, the earth split open and out popped a gigantic lion-shaped beast, 30 meter long and 15 tall. It was covered with black scales that made it look like a pangolin. But its tail was completely different. It was long, and the tip was more like a corn cob, emitting a faint fragrance like an exceptionally precious medicine. And what everyone felt familiar to the eyes was that tail. Why did it look so much like that spirit medicine? Ling Han's expression changed drastically. That wasn't some precious medicine earlier, but the bait that the beast had stuck out. It deliberately changed its tail slowly, making it look as if a precious medicine slowly maturing, to gather the largest number of prey possible so that it could capture them all at once. This also explained why those shattering void tier elites didn't care about this precious medicine. When passed by earlier, they didn't see it at all. This was a powerful existence at the shattering void tier, and here, it was invincible. The 7 heaven tier elites stopped fighting. Seeing the scene, they obviously came to realize everything, but targeted as a prey by a shattering void tier beast, could they even escape? Ang! The beast let out a loud roar. Hong, the sound waves were like the tsunami, and pang pang pang, everything within the radius of few li in the surrounding area was shattered to pieces. The 7 heaven tier elites were obviously the first to bear the brunt of the attack, and their skin cracked and bones shattered, with barely a single breath remaining in their bodies. Luckily, It was precisely because the 7 great heaven-tier warriors started a battle that the others had retreated far away to avoid the attack's shockwaves and thus avoided trouble. Even so, everyone's hands or feet were broken, but they weren't crushed into pieces. The might of shattering void-tier creatures was extremely powerful. A single attack could strike down the stars. Fortunately, Ling Han and the others had retreated even further, and were almost unaffected, though their faces turned pale from the pressure of a shattering void-tier beast's presence, which made it difficult to even breathe. Everyone's expressions changed. How were they to block this? A shattering void-tier beast targeted them, treating them as prey. Run! Everyone almost instantly scattered, and that beast also started to move. With a pull, it swallowed all 7 heaven tiers into its mouth, crunched a few times, and swallowed them into the stomach, and then carried out a massacre. Although everyone fled in all directions, a shattering void-tier creature's speed was so fast that after it ate all the prey in the east, south, and west, the people fleeing towards the north had only run out over 100 li. They were obviously Ling Han's party. Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing were with them. Moreover, there was super geniuses like Yao Huiyu and Jia Ming. They all coincidentally chose the same path because escaping in this direction, they were most likely to encounter reinforcements. Ling Han marveled inwardly. To compare in speed with a shattering void tier was a pipe dream, and he could probably only use the Black Tower to save everyone he cared about. At worst, some people he temporarily wouldn't let out. The gold-seeking rat was frightened into feigning death again, lying straight with its tail straightened up, but Hunyo picked it up and said happily, "The rat's dead, can we eat it?" Once those words left her mouth, the gold-seeking rat was naturally alive and kicking again. "Why does this little girl always want to eat this baby?" it said in its rat language, squeaking. The rabbit felt deeply the same, and while running said, "Now, you also know Uncle Rabbit's pain, right? Cut the crap and run for your life." Ling Han said. What sort of clowns were by his side, not even behaving properly in such a situation? Whose fault was it if not the rabbit's? Hunyo's speed was too fast, so even if it wasn't fast to the point of bending the space, in this kind of situation, it was enough to simply be faster than others. At least one could survive the longest that way. Kakaka, such a mighty beast lion, it's just right to be this king's mount. At this moment, a sweet laughter could be heard, and a girl in purple dress suddenly appeared. No one saw how she appeared, just as if she was naturally there. This girl was gorgeous like peaches and plums. Standing in the sky, the gentle breeze moved her long skirt, and her bare feet were like jade, which added on some natural grace to her appearance. Surprisingly, divine clouds swirled around her as if she was a divine maiden descending to the world. That beast halted abruptly and stared vigilantly at this girl as its nostrils puffed out flames. It seemed very terrified of her. Being able to make a shattering void tier beast fear, needless to say, this girl was certainly also a shattering void tier elite. Yao Huiyu and Jia Ming, the proud disciples of the 5 great sects, have obviously seen the shattering void tier warriors in their own sects and other sects, but none of them matched the girl in front of their eyes. How truly strange, she was a shattering void tier elite, and definitely couldn't have appeared out of thin air. Ling Han was relieved. This girl was the Lunar King. "Little kitty, be a good mount for this king." Lunar King struck, attacking the beast lion. They fought so hard that everyone ran away, for each aftershock could have killed them 100 times if it were to directly hit them. In the distance, there was a party of 100 men marching fast, their formation astonishingly orderly. They looked just like an army. 10 people in a row formed a neat square array, and each person looked solemn while holding a long spear, exuding an iron-blooded aura. Each person's cultivation was the deity transformation tier, which was very surprising. Deity transformation tier warriors could be called experts anywhere, but this 100-people team seemed to be someone's personal troops. In the front row, there was someone who carried a banner, painted with a slender hand that held up a waning moon. They stopped in front of the fight. Far closer than Ling Han and the others were to the Lunar King and the Beast Lion's battle. When the ripples swept over, they struck out their spears together, and the power of 100 people actually miraculously fused to obtain battle prowess of the heaven tier, resolving the aftershock completely. Everyone stared in shock. 100 deity transformation tier warriors could rival a heaven tier elite? This was like a dream. Ling Han understood that this was probably Lunar King's personal army, and only the Purple Moon Empire, a powerful force buried countless years ago, grasped such a miraculous formation, gathering the power of masses into one. The Lunar King was really too powerful. Her slender hands were like divine material, and with a swat, the beast lion turned over and over repeatedly. No matter how terrifying the attacks the beast lion launched, she took them on very casually, appearing relaxed and happy. On her body, Ling Han felt a similar aura to that of the Sword King and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden Absolute Power, the king amongst kings. In a short amount of time, the beast lion was seized by the Lunar King, lying on the ground with its tongue sticking out. It kept struggling with all its strength, yet it was to no avail. The Lunar King was half sitting and half lying down on the beast lion's back in a beautiful but sexy posture, beckoning to Ling Han, saying, "Little handsome boy, come massage this king's legs." She straightened her long legs, and under the dress was a snow-white and smooth thigh, wreaking havoc in one's heart. Chapter 706. Teased. Reverie _ Henyi. Quite a few people were envious, or even driven mad. This beauty was not only extraordinarily beautiful, but also possessed the peak strength of humanity, subduing even the beast lion. If one were to have such an exceptional beauty, what more could one want in life? Even if the others were envious or jealous, they wouldn't dare declare it, not even gasping. That was a shattering void tier elite, and only she could tease others. "Little brother, charge forth bravely. Conquer our king. Men also have courageous spirit." However, the stern soldiers in the square array shocked everyone as they began to whistle and give Ling Han encouragement. Now these people weren't military-disciplined soldiers, but a bunch of ruffians. Ling Han was speechless. Who were these people? The Lunar King pretended to be displeased and said, "You bastards trying to revolt? We wouldn't dare. It's just that our king's not young anymore, and it's time to find a man to marry. We aren't suited for our king, so we can only ask an outsider." Hee, I think this little brother looks pretty good, handsome, refined, and surprisingly talented, and more importantly, someone who can make our king start to flirt is too hard to come by. The veterans all shouted out glibly, each of them very excited. "Won't allow you guys to take Nyo's Ling Han." Nyo was immediately on guard and got in front of Ling Han, glaring quite viciously at the 100 veterans as if a small tiger. The veterans all laughed loudly. They'd all been through 100 battles, and weren't really afraid of Nyo's vicious look. Our kings met a rival. A love triangle, how complicated. They started kicking up a fuss again. The Lunar King also laughed loudly. She rode on the beast lion and said, "Men, follow this king. This land is too important, and mustn't fall in the hands of others." "Yes, my king." The veterans instantly became solemn, standing at attention together and replying in a unified voice. With their long spears held high, they emitted the spirit of endless bloodthirst. This 100-person square formation was extremely frightening. If they attacked separately, Ling Han was confident that he could defeat them all, but against their array, he would only be defeated. 100 people formed an array to raise their battle prowess to the heaven tier. Was an extremely terrifying thing. Everyone didn't dare to breathe heavily, being intimidated by this army. Even their souls were trembling as if they saw endless blood and gore from the countless elites killed by this army. The Lunar King soared through the sky on the beast lion and shot out a divine chain to bring the 100-people army along, crossing the sea together. Brother Ling, could you possibly know that mighty person?" Wenren Qian asked. The shock on her face could hardly be concealed. That woman was a shattering void tier elite. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched as he said, "I guess I know her." He was very gloomy, being teased by an old monster that had been buried underground for countless years. Seeing Ling Han become taciturn, Wenren Qian didn't ask any more questions. In this battle, 90% of the forces that had entered had died, and it could be said to be quite tragic. There were only about 100 people living, but without exception, they were all talented super geniuses, or else they wouldn't be able to follow the team, and would have already been eaten by the beast lion halfway on their path. Ling Han. Jia Ming's gaze looked over, and 2 red rays fired out from his eyes extremely bizarre. Xian. Yao Huiyu also looked over, his expression extremely excited. At this time, Xu Xian had already returned to her original exceptionally gorgeous looks, which naturally made him excited. This was his Xu Xian. "Oh, Ling Han? Another youngster walked over, looking ordinary, but examining closely, one would discover that his gaze was extremely deep, just as if the endless ocean. Ling Han shrugged his shoulder and muttered, "All the monsters and freaks have really come out." Xian. Yao Huiyu was the first to run over to Zhu Xian'er's side, looking at her in a daze. Zhu Xian'er's expression was indifferent as she said, "Please, Brother Yao, be self-possessed and call Xian'er as Lady Zhu or use Xian'er's full name." Yao Huiyu turned his head abruptly and looked towards Ling Han, and said, "Ling Han, I want a duel." Ling Han laughed and said, "We fought alongside together, fighting and killing isn't good. Well, I have a little buddy here, if you can beat him, then we'll fight." He tossed out the rock spirit. Pa, the golem landed on the ground and started to crawl around Ling Han without a care. That look was truly no different from a dog. Yao Huiyu's expression was full of anger. Ling Han had actually sent out such a thing to fight him. How much did Ling Han look down on him? He unleashed his sword, pointed at Ling Han and said, "Fight me." The rock spirit saw it and was instantly enraged. "I'm acting cute here so that the master will think of me from time to time, giving me good rocks to eat. How dare you point a sword at my master? What are you implying?" It got up and roared at Yao Huiyu with its mouth wide open. Hong! The sound wave were visible to the eye as it surged towards Yao Huiyu, shockingly terrifying. Now the rock spirit had advanced into the late stage of the spiritual infant tier, and on top of its identity as a spirit of the five elements, it was a king amongst kings. Its strength was frighteningly formidable. Yao Huiyu's hair was scattered, whistling and fluttering in the hurricane. He stared at the rock spirit and didn't dare to be careless again. He took a deep breath, his expression grave as he knew this would be a fierce enemy. "Fight in the skies." Ling Han dismissed them. The rock spirit immediately soared into the sky. It hadn't reached the deity transformation tier anyway, and couldn't extract the earth's power to strengthen itself, so fighting in the sky made no difference to it at all. Yao Huiyu also rose into the sky and carried out a fierce battle with the rock spirit. Ling Han didn't even look at Jia Ming, and looked at the unfamiliar youngster, and said, "What are you called, sir?" "Xu Xiu Ran," this youngster said indifferently, and also gave Ling Han a smile. His 2 rows of teeth were shockingly white. So he was Xu Xiu Ran. He looked really ordinary. Once the small Saber King appeared, his entire body was bound with Saber Chi, but this person was rumored to have achieved Saber Heart, or at least half a Saber Heart, yet looked ordinary. The gap was truly big. Ling Han, however, was greatly alarmed within. Was this returning to the natural state? He was proud within and said, "You and he go together." He pointed Jia Ming. "Humph." Jia Ming just turned around to leave and said, "Xu Xiu Ran, this brat is for you to deal with. I sense that there's a fortune for me in the seas and don't have time to waste on this nobody." He paused in his tracks and turned to look at Zhu Xian'er and Wenren Qian, revealing a savagely grim smile. "You're all my." Xiu, he sprung up and leapt towards the great sea. When he landed, he stepped on the surface of the water and sprang back up, leaping completely with brute force, but his speed was still surprisingly fast. Xu Xiu Ran stood with his hands behind his back and said, "Ling Han, you've killed a disciple of the Absolute Saber Sect, and as Absolute Saber Sect's next sect master, I have to get justice for him." Chapter 707. Battling Xu Xiu Ran. Reverie _ Henyi. Bull*** T. Ling Han shouted coldly. "Since the ancient times, how many people has the Absolute Saber Sect killed, and why doesn't it do justice to those that it killed? This is a world of jungle justice, so cut the crap and talk with strength." Xu Xiu Ran wasn't irritated, simply smiling and said, "What right have you to talk about strength in front of me? And who the hell are you?" Ling Han gave tit for tat. Xu Xiu Ran flicked his finger, and Wang, a saber ray immediately swirled towards Ling Han. The saber ray was like a flash of lightning, dazzlingly painful to the eyes. Ling Han greeted it with a punch, striking extremely precisely against the saber ray. Ji! The saber ray was as if corporeal and pushed Ling Han backwards, sending him sliding back for more than 30 meters. Zhu Xian'er and the others were shocked. Xu Xiu Ran was too strong, ridiculously strong. Xu Xiu Ran grinned and said, "I was constantly cultivating Saber Heart before, so my tier progression was very slow. After finally achieving Saber Heart, I focused on improving my cultivation, leaping from the spiritual infant tier to the deity transformation tier. *T. Could tears be broken through simply by focusing on it? This was a fucking freak, cultivating Saber Heart at 21 to 22 years of age, and even advancing into the deity transformation tier at similar age. He was so powerful that it made people's hairs stand on end. Ling Han retracted his fist. Da. Fresh blood dripped down from his fist and landed on the grass, yet it let out a thunderous sound. His tier was too high, and on top of physical cultivation, each drop of blood was as heavy as a lofty mountain. He cultivated the diamond body, and his physique was comparable to rare metal of the deity transformation tier, but he was actually injured by a Xu Xiu Ran saber ray flicked from a finger. It was clear how shocking Xu Xiu Ran's battle prowess was. An even higher tier and the addition of Saber Heart made Xu Xiu Ran's saber ray truly reach an all-conquering level. It was shot out with flick of a finger, and if a 10th tier spirit tool were to be used. Ling Han pondered for a moment, then cracked a smile. I haven't reached 20 years old this year, and I'm certain to cross into the deity transformation tier at 20 years old. Sword Heart isn't incomprehensible to me, either. Aren't you embarrassing yourself by comparing your talent to mine? Hearing those words, everyone nearby was visibly moved. Yes, they only saw the power of Xu Xiu Ran's finger-flicked saber ray, and forgot Ling Han's age and strength. He was a freak who wasn't any inferior. Xu Xiu Ran smiled, and said, "How could the heart of martial arts be easy to comprehend? I studied the saber when I was 5, and even held the saber when I was sleeping, accompanying the saber, being one with the saber, and it still looks 16 years to grasp Saber Heart." That's because you're too stupid. For a genius like me, 5 to 6 years is enough. Ling Han was full of confidence. In his former life, he'd only formed a few flashes of sword chi, which was unbearably wretched in comparison, and obviously was of no help to his sword path in this life. Thus, his confidence wasn't unfounded, and he certainly was kick-ass. In the former life, his attainments in alchemy had surpassed the ancestors and amazed the contemporaries because he'd spent all his efforts on alchemy. In this life, he'd spent them all on martial arts and the sword path, and would also burst with dazzling radiance. Xu Xiu Ran was astounded. Listing his attainments actually couldn't attack Ling Han's confidence? No matter whether it was 21-year-old deity transformation tier warrior or cultivating Saber Heart, both were surprising records that created history. But Ling Han was still so confident. Was this guy a fool? No matter what, he couldn't break down Ling Han's confidence with words. He beckoned casually, and Xiu, a stalk of grass, was caught in his hand. He said, "Then I'll use this grass as a saber to cut off your head, spilling your blood all across this stretch of wilderness." How arrogant, using a grass as a saber to behead a genius, such confidence. Ling Han, however, didn't dare to be careless. Reaching their level, a grass or a leaf could unleash the greatest of might. He also pulled up a stalk of grass and said, "Then I shall see for myself." The stronger the opponent, the greater his pressure, and the more likely it was that he would comprehend Sword Heart. Sword Heart, the third and the highest stage on the sword path, but different from Sword Ray, it didn't need to be constructed upon the basis of comprehension of Sword Chi and Sword Ray. It was called the third stage because it was easier to comprehend Sword Heart after forming the other two. However, this wasn't unconditional. Ling Han had already formed the Sword Ray. The higher his cultivation, the more powerful it would be, but no matter how strong it became, he wouldn't be able to naturally reach the Sword Heart. Sword Heart was a completely new sort of understanding. Ling Han was full of confidence. He'd once received Feng Peyun's sword intent, and a shred of this great swordsman's Sword Heart gave him a clear direction. It was not copying Feng Peyun's Sword Heart, but letting him know what Sword Heart was and how to walk this path. "Come, give me pressure." Ling Han cracked a smile and initiated the attack, thrusting the grass in hand, and instantly, Sword Ray was ablaze, blinding the eyes. Xu Xiu Ran obviously wouldn't fear to fight him, and struck out with the saber in hand while also deploying a saber ray, slashing towards Ling Han. Ling Han leapt up into the sky. "Come fight unrestrainedly in the sky." "Wrong, this was never a duel, but your execution." Xu Xiu Ran followed into the sky and swung the grass repeatedly. The saber rays intertwined and danced in the sky, extremely terrifying. Ling Han deployed the demon fairy step, and with the blessing of the thunderclap ninth heaven, his speed was fast like a ghost, extremely strange. But what shocked everyone was that Xu Xiu Ran's speed wasn't any inferior to his. Apparently, although he didn't learn the thunderclap ninth heaven, he'd also mastered a surprising movement art, which allowed his speed to cross a tier, barely being able to compare with that of heaven tier elites. This made his speed no slower than Ling Han's. The two people fought speed with speed, moving at a speed comparable to heaven tier elites, fast to the point that the people below couldn't even capture them with the naked eye. The people with somewhat lower strength even began to puke. The pressure on Ling Han was enormous. Each step was accompanied by the danger of death. What was Saber Heart? The core of martial arts was all the same, allowing martial arts sensory abilities to increase to a terrifying level. No matter where the attack came from, they could grasp it immediately, and they could also seize the opponent's weak point, releasing the swiftest and fiercest of attacks. In other words, no matter how Ling Han attacked, Xu Xiu Ran could react immediately, and his attacks would be completely without a trace. On top of Xu Xiu Ran having cultivation in the higher tier, he had a clear advantage in power, and every saber strike of his was lethal, extremely frightening. To Ling Han's advantage was his formidable physique. Even if he was struck occasionally, the saber ray would only cut open his skin, and never hurt his meridians. With the circulation of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, his injuries would immediately heal. Hunyeo wouldn't laugh and joke for the first time, her small face tense. Ling Han definitely wasn't worse than Xu Xiu Ran, but there was a big gap in cultivation after all. Ling Han, go go. Beat the hell out of this guy. Hunyeo suddenly raised her small fists and cheered on Ling Han. Chapter 708. Broken Saber? Absolute Saber. Reverie _ Henyi. Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran battled fiercely. In the skies were stunning saber rays and sword rays, making it seem as if the sky would collapse and the stars would fall. In contrast, Yao Huiyu and the golems' battle immediately paled in comparison. Although they were also kings amongst kings, they clearly fell a notch short compared to Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran. Even if everyone couldn't capture Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran's figures, they were still paying attention to their battle. At least, the flashes of saber rays and sword rays could be seen, clashing fiercely against each other in the sky. Xu Xiu Ran suddenly stopped attacking and said, "I'm now somewhat fond of your talent. Ling Han, if you enter my sect and acknowledge me as your teacher, I can spare your life." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I use swords, and if I go to the Absolute Saber sect, are you guys planning to change your name to the Absolute Sword sect and learn the sword from me?" Xu Xiu Ran said dully, "You've deviated from the essence. The world's martial arts are all connected. So what difference is there between saber and sword?" "All right, then you can use swords from now on," Ling Han said with a smile. Xu Xiu Ran was silent momentarily and said, "Today, I will behead you." "You've already said those words. From the looks of it now, it's no different from fighting," Ling Han said. Xu Xiu Ran ignored his ridicule and simply unleashed a saber. Pooh! Some people immediately burst into laughter. If Xu Xiu Ran took out a 10th tier spirit tool, everyone definitely wouldn't be shocked. As the most outstanding disciple of this generation of the Absolute Saber sect, and even the future sect master, what would be so strange about having a 10th tier spirit tool? However, this saber wasn't a 10th tier spirit tool, but a very unsightly rusty broken saber. If this were a treasured saber, then there would be too many treasured sabers in the world. Ling Han, however, looked grave as he fixed his eyes on that broken saber, and said, "Is it an antique?" "It's an antique." Xu Xiu Ran nodded, and stroked the blade with his finger, revealing an absent-minded look. "From the age of 5, I've always accompanied this saber, but I still haven't received its full recognition till now." Recognition? Ling Han was shocked, and said, "The tool spirit hasn't died?" This saber was so heavily damaged. Would the tool spirit still be present? If there wasn't a tool spirit, there wouldn't be the saying of recognition. Xu Xiu Ran shook his head and said, "The tool spirit has long died, but the person who used this sword at the time was too powerful, so powerful that even after countless years, there's still a shred of his saber intent within the saber. Without the recognition of this shred of saber intent, it's impossible to exert its strongest power." Ling Han's fighting spirit was ablaze. With a smile he said, "Then I shall experience it." Might as well tell you, this saber's name is Absolute Saber. Xu Xiu Ran suddenly looked up as endless saber lights burst from his eyes. Absolute Saber. Was Absolute Saber sect named because of it? No, the Divine Realm also had an Absolute Saber Hall, or Absolute Saber Palace, a sect of sort. Anyway, it was named using the phrase, Absolute Saber. So could it possibly also be because of this saber? Which elite once used this saber? The founder of the Divine Realm's Absolute Saber sect. Ling Han's expression was more graver now. This was extremely likely to be a divine tool. A broken divine tool. He pulled out the demon birth sword and formed a sword formula with his left hand, preparing for action. Hong, Xu Xiu Ran's dark hair suddenly rolled up as he stared at Ling Han. His expression became wild. The mottled saber began to emit radiance as if a supreme being was about to walk out from the blade, making everyone feel breathless and involuntarily start bowing. Ling Han lit up 4 vein-like patterns on the demon birth sword, but to his surprise, more vein-like patterns actually lit up on their own. The 10th tier spirit tool, activated on its own. As expected, the saber intent within that broken saber was too terrifying. Stimulating demon birth sword's recovery, it made this spirit tool feel a great threat. If it didn't resist with all its strength, it would be broken. How terrifying was a 10th tier spirit tool at full power? It was equivalent to a shattering void tier elite. This meant that Xu Xiu Ran, who held Absolute Saber, qualified to fight a shattering void tier elite, the thought of which was absolutely numbing. What exactly was this saber? It was clearly without a tool's spirit, and even the vein-like patterns on the blade no longer lit up. It was simply left with a shred of the first user's saber intent, but it was still powerful to such an inconceivable degree. What if Xu Xiu Ran's cultivation was even higher? Ling Han's expression stern. He communicated with Black Tower, saying, "Small Tower, what do you think of that saber?" "More than enough to kill you," Small Tower said calmly. "Can you say something pleasant?" "If I exhibit my power, I can destroy everything," Small Tower said. Ling Han was speechless. This guy would destroy everything at every turn. He sighed. "I know you're very kick-ass, but can you say something more relevant?" Small Tower paused shortly, and said, "You can use a power boost. Combined with the demon birth sword, you'll have the power to fight him. Otherwise, you're extremely likely to be slain." Ling Han was out of sorts. He'd advanced to spiritual infant tier and could use Black Tower's power boost again, but to use it at this place, he felt it somewhat not worth it. However, to have him run, then that would be even more unpleasant. "All right, give me a power boost." He immediately made up his mind. Xu Xiu Ran taking out that saber was absolutely cheating. Only shattering void tier elites could suppress it, and even heaven tier warriors would have to take a detour. How would he resist it without using his ultimate move? Hong! A great power surged in and Ling Han's aura immediately began to skyrocket, instantly breaking through the limit of the spiritual infant tiers, advancing into the deity transformation tier, and rocketing all the way to 3rd layer before stopping. Ling Han didn't stop and took out the last 5 revolutions black jade pill and swallowed it, raising his battle prowess again by 8 stars. Now, his battle prowess was infinitely near the shattering void tier. His peak stage in the former life with the use of medicine still had not been quite as good as now. Come battle! Ling Han activated the demon birth sword and charged towards Xu Xiu Ran. Xu Xiu Ran was obviously fearless and wielded his saber to parry. Pang! In the exchange of blows, Xu Xiu Ran was instantly sent flying, but a bloodstain also appeared Ling Han's cheek, fresh blood dripping. Everyone was both shocked and puzzled. Earlier, Xu Xiu Ran clearly had the advantage in power, so why was it reversed now? But even so, Ling Han was still injured by the saber ray, although not heavily. Still, a wound was a wound. Ling Han touched his face and his hand was full of blood. Although indestructible heaven's scroll was activated, blood was still dripping. This was the first time he'd encountered such a situation. The saber intent within Absolute Saber was too strong, filled with destruction, stopping the restoration of indestructible heaven's scrolls. If Ling Han entered the Black Tower momentarily and borrowed the power of the Black Tower, he would be able to easily resolve this saber intent, but Ling Han had no intention of doing so at all. He hadn't been injured for a very long time, and this rare experience could make him feel the pressure between life and death. He let out a battle cry and charged towards Xu Xiu Ran once again. Hong, hong, hong. The two great geniuses carried out a fierce exchange. Chapter 709. Each taking a step back. Reverie _ Hen Yi. However, at the current stage, Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran weren't the ones leading the battle. The Demon Birth Sword and the Absolute Saber were. The martial intent within the Demon Birth Sword had already recovered, resisting Absolute Saber's terrifying saber intent. If it hadn't, the Demon Birth Sword could be cut in half by now. These two weapons were both of the Shattering Void tier, and with that comparison, no matter how freakish Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran were, they were no longer the protagonists. However, their role was not to be neglected. No matter which one of them died in battle, the Demon Birth Sword or the Absolute Saber would also lose, and this battle would obviously be over. Ding, 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 ding. In the fierce clash, countless rice-sized nicks already appeared on the Demon Birth Sword, and although the Absolute Saber had been tattered in the first place, it wasn't damaged further, apparently being a notch better. Such damage wasn't a big deal as long as the weapon was nourished. A 10th tier spirit tool could completely recover just like martial artists, having considerable healing ability. The condition was that the vein-like patterns on it weren't destroyed. This was the key as to why spirit tools were spirit tools. Evidently, in the clash between spirit tools, the Absolute Saber suppressed the Demon Birth Sword, but Ling Han's strength in turn suppressed Xu Xiu Ran's, giving him enough pressure, so he couldn't fully stimulate the saber intent within the Absolute Saber, pulling the battle prowess of both parties onto the same standard again. This was absolutely unfavorable for Ling Han. He'd relied on Black Tower's power boost and medicine to obtain his current battle prowess, and once his cultivation fell back down, he and the Demon Birth Sword were obviously going to be totally subdued. Not good news at all. Ling Han might as well not control the Demon Birth Sword. This spirit tool had already reactivated by itself and could completely fight alone. He took out the Sunset Bow under the premise of not being able to use the 3 styles of Black Origin. Archery was currently his strongest killer move. 3 mystical powers gathered simultaneously as Ling Han fired an arrow. Xiu, the sharp arrow turned into a streak of light, shooting towards Xu Xiu Ran. Xu Xiu Ran brandished his saber, and ding, Absolute Saber actually struck the arrow's shaft, easily slicing in half this treasured arrow forged with 8-tier rare metal. After this arrow was overcome, both of them were shocked. Ling Han was obviously shocked by Xu Xiu Ran's reaction. His current battle prowess reached the limit of the Heaven tier, and the annihilating Dragon Star arrow that was shot out was still blocked by Xu Xiu Ran. Xu Xiu Ran was even more shocked because he wasn't the one who struck it down. It was the saber intent within the Absolute Saber that blocked it. If it had been him, he'd already have been shot by the arrow. Frightening. Both of them labeled each other an opponent that they couldn't underestimate. After this, they no longer attacked. I have to correct myself, you indeed are a rare opponent, Xu Xiu Ran said with a smile. As things stand, I can't kill you. He was rather honest. Ling Han also smiled and said, I can't kill you either. Then let's stop temporarily. Xu Xiu Ran put away the Absolute Saber. Next time we meet, if your progress isn't fast, then you'll only be killed by me. Likewise, Ling Han said. Xu Xiu Ran didn't look at the others, and simply trod on the sky and left. Ling Han stared at his back for a long time before landing. His battle prowess was raised by Black Tower's power boost and medicinal pills, but was Xu Xiu Ran's battle prowess truly his own? Obviously not. He definitely couldn't use the Absolute Saber too long, which was the reason why he'd retreated so resolutely. If both parties continued fighting, it would be a matter of seeing whose trump card could hold out longer, and life and death would be instantly decided the moment either couldn't. This was what neither of them wanted to see. So, Xu Xiu Ran proactively stopped the fight, and Ling Han also wasn't aggressive. Brother-in-law, damn. Li Feng Yu muttered. The battle just now almost drove him crazy. One was in the spiritual infant tier, and the other was in the deity transformation tier, but both exhibited the battle prowess of the shattering void tier. Ling Han put away the Demon Birth Sword. This spirit tool had many nicks and needed proper nourishment for a period of time. He obviously couldn't do it at the cultivation of the spiritual infant tier, but Black Tower could. Congratulations, Brother Ling, climbing to a greater peak again. Wenren Chen said sincerely. If Ling Han defeating the small Saber King only made people think he was hard to surpass, then that battle just now would be enough to make all geniuses despair. Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran had already left the so-called geniuses far behind, reaching a height that the latter could only look up to. In the sky, the rock spirit and Yao Huiyu's battle also ended in a tie, and such a result made Yao Huiyu's face turn livid. He simply turned and left, having no face to talk to Zhu Xian Air. He couldn't even defeat Ling Han's puppet, so would he still have the face to challenge Ling Han? Go! Ling Han led everyone on their way, but didn't meet with the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, simply bringing Yuan Changhe with him. Everyone trod on the surface of the sea, and with their strength, they only needed to borrow a shred of power to be able to walk swiftly on water. Although the battle was over for a while, everyone still kept talking about Ling Han and Xu Xiu Ran. It was truly too stunning, and had them discussing enthusiastically and unable to stop. This sea region was ridiculously large and devoid of any islands, so they could only hasten on their way, not even having the chance to stop to eat a meal. Good thing was that after advancing into the flower blossom tier, food and drink was not a necessity, having some effect but by no means being substantial. They were constantly on the road and the scenery was the same, so everyone became more and more bored, no longer talking and simply wanting to leave this sea region quickly. Pang! All of a sudden, the wave split as an extremely thick tentacle came out, lashing towards Ling Han and the others. Ling Han greeted it with punches. His slender figure was absolutely unproportionally small in front of this giant tentacle. Pang! He was immediately sent flying, but the tentacle also paused slightly, giving the others time to spread out. This wasn't the first time they'd encountered a surprise attack on the sea, but this surprise attack was the most powerful of all so far. Deity Transformation Tier Beast. Ling Han flew back. His power was no match for it, but his physique was too powerful, not fearing a head-on fight. This beast didn't reveal its true body, and simply waved a tentacle. Seems like an octopus? People guessed. Everyone mainly lived on the land, and had little contact with the sea, which was territory that belonged to the sea people. Xiu, that tentacle lashed over again, and the sea undulated as another tentacle emerged, attacking as well. With the power of the deity transformation tier in addition to that amount, the striking power definitely reached the peak of the deity transformation tier. No one dared to face it directly, even the rock spirit didn't dare to take it on. Only a freak like Ling Han was qualified to exchange blows with it. Grilled octopus. Grilled octopus. Hunyou cheered and flew towards a large tentacle. Judging by her stance, she was going to forcibly cut one off. The rabbit waved and said, "Bring Uncle Rabbit a piece." Ling Han laughed loudly, unleashed the demon birth sword, and charged over. A deity transformation tier beast was obviously a greatly tonic thing, so how could he miss out on it after seeing one? Chapter 710. Myrietes' Treasured Pearl. Reverie _ Henyi. Everyone fought the tentacle monster together. Ling Han was obviously the main force as except for him. No one else could withstand the beast's whipping. After he'd blocked the tentacle monster's attack, Hunyou and the others took advantage of it to unleash their power, cutting this beast and collecting its flesh. However, this great beast's defense was astonishing, and sabers and swords were absolutely useless. It was as slippery as if it was coated with a layer of oil, and it had excellent elasticity, which also had the effect of neutralizing the power of enemy attacks. Only two people could pose a threat to it: Ling Han and Hunyou. Ling Han had the demon birth sword, which was extremely sharp, and Hunyou had sharp claws that could tear apart the tentacle monster's skin. Ripping off a large chunk of meat at one seat was an absolutely horrendous level of violence. The gold-seeking rat shrank in Zhu Xian'er's arms and covered its eyes with its small claws, not daring to watch anymore. This little girl was too savage and fierce, and she thought constantly about its flesh. Thinking about it was deadly frightening. The tentacle monster was furious, raising even more tentacles to attack Ling Han and Hunyou, but it only had a total of 8 tentacles. Waving them, it stirred up the sea and rolled up a tsunami that was at least 30 meters high. This beast was really enormous. The tentacles revealed above the sea's surface alone were over 300 meters long, and the parts within the water were definitely larger, easily stirring up raging tides. Ling Han had wanted to charge into the sea to cut down this tentacle's true body, but once he was in the sea, he discovered that something was off. The water's pressure was surprisingly immense, pressing him such that even his bones crackled. If he were to venture to the bottom of the sea, His entire body would be squished into pieces. After fighting for half a day, the tentacle monster retreated in defeat in the end, leaving a long tentacle, which was broken off by Ling Han and Hu Niu together. One cut with a sword and one tore with claws, and forcibly kept the monster's huge tentacle. If it weren't so, that large monster might not have retreated. Seeing Ling Han store the tentacle in the Black Tower, Wan Ren Qian, the Li siblings, and Yuan Cheng he were left speechless. Just how large was this guy's spatial tool, being able to store a tentacle that large? There's grilled fish to eat. Hu Niu smiled happily. They advanced. It was obviously not a suitable place to grill fish, so they had to wait until they arrived on land if they wanted to cook it. However, on the second day, they immediately encountered the tentacle monster's surprise attack again, and it actually grew back the tentacle that had been severed on the previous day. It could be seen very clearly that that tentacle was somewhat shorter, and the color of it was brighter. If it weren't so, Ling Han and the others would definitely have thought that this was another tentacle monster. The result of the battle was that the tentacle monster again contributed a tentacle, which was stored in Ling Han's pocket. On the third day, it came again, and then left a tentacle again. Everyone was speechless. Were you coming to hunt or to give gifts? On the fourth day, this tentacle beast came as expected. This time, Ling Han and the others already made a plan in advance. After Ling Han heavily damaged the tentacle monster with annihilating dragon star arrow, rock spirit and Hu Niu would join forces to grab a tentacle, forcibly dragging it out from the seafloor. It was an absolute leviathan. Its tentacles actually reached more than 15,000 meters long from its body. To everyone's surprise, while they'd thought this was a super large octopus, this large guy's body actually shrank into a clam shell. This clam shell was obviously astonishingly large, with its 300-meter-long body like an underwater palace. When the battle shifted into the sky, the tentacle monster's battle prowess decreased greatly, and it was ganged up on by everyone. Finally, its 8 tentacles were severed, without giving it any time to grow them back, and then its shell was broken open as it was torn to shreds. Everyone cried out in surprise, seeing a large pearl at the center of the clam shell. Even at a distance, the spirit chi within the pearl could be felt, calming people as if they could comprehend the truth of martial arts with it. It would take at least 1,000 years for such a large pearl to grow, right? Li Feng, you guessed. Wan Ren Qian shook her head, and said, definitely more than that. I've seen millennium pearls, which were only the size of fists. This one is about the size of a millstone. Ling Han also nodded. In his former life, he'd also seen some millennium pearls, which were ground to powder and added to ingredients to greatly improve the effect of pill formation. They were about the size of fists, far from this one's. The longer things live, the rarer they are. This giant clam lived for countless years, possibly several thousand or over 10,000 years, he said. According to my conjecture, this giant clam was captured by this tentacle monster, and its shell was also taken over, with it slowly digesting the power of the pearl. It could grow new limbs so quickly because it was its own specialty and due to the benefits this pearl provided. Zhu Xian was shocked and said, in other words, this pearl was originally even larger? It should have been so. Ling Han nodded. We got rich, such a large pearl. How much origin crystals can it sell for? Li Fengyu's eyes were full of sparkling stars. Such a treasure, you're actually going to use it to exchange for origin crystals? Yuan Cheng, he sneered. As short-sighted as a rat. The gold-seeking rat was instantly annoyed. When did this baby offend you? It stared at Yuan Cheng, grinding its teeth and wishing to bite him. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, we should thank this beast, not only gifting us large amounts of beast meat, but also a Myrietes' one treasured pearl. I think this is the one and only in the entire vast lands. There were originally very few clams that could live for 10 millennia. Normally, their lifespan was several hundred years, and to produce a Myrietes' treasured pearl, it not only had to have a long life, but also be lucky, not being hurt by any living creatures during that time. This old clam ultimately hadn't escaped its fate of being eaten. The tentacle monster's tentacles were all-pervasive, and it was able to worm into the old clam's tightly shut shell, absorbing all of its flesh. It definitely met its bane. Ling Han stored away the pearl. This pearl was too precious, and if it were shattered, at least half the essence within would be lost. That would be what a fool would do. He took the pearl and gave the Li siblings and 1 Ren Qian some spirit liquid as compensation. Everyone was delighted. After all, killing the tentacle monster was mainly the work of Ling Han and Hu Niu. Yuan Cheng he didn't get anything, but he wasn't displeased. This was because Ling Han treated him as one of his own, and splitting something with him would be treating him as a stranger. His attitude also changed, starting as unconvinced to now being completely convinced, and that was mainly because he saw the gap between him and Ling Han. At this moment, 3 people flew over from afar, apparently with a clear target in mind. 2 were old and 1 young. The 2 old people were in the deity transformation tier, and that youngster was in the flower blossom tier, yet the latter shockingly walked in the front, something that seemed somewhat unusual. Martial arts world was most particular about the pecking order. "Hand over that treasured pearl, and you guys can get lost," the youngster commanded. When his gaze swept by Xu Xian Air, his eyes couldn't help but shoot out radiance. He pointed over and continued, "She stays. Hooray, hooray, we'll sell her to you." Hu Niu immediately clapped her hands in agreement. Chapter 711. 3 Kinds of People. Reverie _ Hen Yi. Hu Niu always viewed Xu Xian Air as a rival, constantly thinking of packing her up and sending her away. Therefore, if someone wanted Xu Xian Air, she would obviously raise both hands and feet in favor. That youngster looked proud and took it for granted. With his identity, could he not get a woman that he wanted? However, this woman was truly beautiful, exceptionally gorgeous and unparalleled. Normally, the 2 beauties by her side alone would also tempt him, but now, his eyes only had room for 1 person. Too beautiful. How could there be such a beauty who simply shouldn't be on earth, but a fairy from the 9th heaven? He frowned and said, "What are you guys still staring blankly for?" Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and said, "Needless to say, you're definitely some spoiled 2nd generation that harms the family as is his duty, and diligently advances towards his target, a typical person who courts disaster." That youngster snorted and said, "I'm Yu Xian Ming, and my ancestor is a heaven-tier elite. So is the 3rd and 7th forefather. 3 heaven-tier warriors in 1 family. This was indeed kick-ass. Placed in Ling Han's former life, this was unimaginable, but now that martial arts flourished, shattering void-tier elites were even in the hundreds. So what were 3 heaven-tier elites in 1 family? Ling Han gave a plain O and said, "A heaven-tier force, I indeed can't beat it for now." This was the truth. If he were to battle a heaven-tier warrior, he would have to reach the deity transformation tier first when the time came. It obviously wouldn't be a problem for him to rival a heaven tier with his freakishness, fully surpassing his peak battle prowess in the previous life. Thinking about it, this really was like a dream. How many years did he cultivate in this life? "Good that you know you're a nobody, so why don't you hand over the treasured pearl?" Yu Xian Ming shouted coldly. He had always been self-satisfied, and Ling Han's slight refusal already made him extremely displeased, provoking his killing intent. "What if I don't hand it over? You're going to hit me?" Ling Han said with a smile. Yu Xian Ming pointed his finger at Ling Han and said, "Not hit you, but beat the hell out of you. Senior Zhu, Senior Yang, take them all down," he said as he turned to the 2 old men. "Yes, young master." The 2 deity transformation tier old men replied respectfully. One of them was called Zhu Bai, and the other one was called Yang Chong. According to reason, they shouldn't have to listen to a youngster, but this youngster was the most talented one in the 3 generations of the Yu family, so the 2 of them were assigned to Yu Xian Yin as guardians. Although they were his guardians officially, in fact, they were bodyguards, hatchet men, high-class slaves, you name it. But it couldn't be helped who told the Yu family to be powerful and have 3 heaven-tier elites. "I most dislike 3 kinds of people." Yu Xian Ming pretended to be profound on the side. The first kind, an idiot that has no ability, yet acts arrogant. The second kind, the ones who don't eat spice one. The third kind, the ones who disobey my orders. These 3 kinds of people that fall into my hands all end up the same. Dead. As he spoke, Zhu Bai and Yang Chong had already charged towards Ling Han and the others, raising their hands with martial intent circulating. A large red tiger charged out from one person's body, while the other person unleashed a white crane formed by interwoven vein-like patterns. The terrifying auras alone could make low-tier martial artists unable to lift their heads. This was a mystery realm, and people dying here was something perfectly normal, so the two of them attacked without mercy. Unfortunately, Ling Han and the others were all kings among martial artists, and wouldn't be overwhelmed by their auras. At most, their faces would turn slightly pale because of the seemingly tangible presence, but the effects on their battle prowess would be extremely limited. Ling Han laughed and said, "Cheng He, you take care of one." Yuan Cheng he was shocked. He was only in the spiritual infant tier, so how could he resist a deity transformation tier warrior? He indeed was a genius and a very strong one, but he definitely couldn't surpass a large tier to fight a deity transformation tier opponent. But since Ling Han had spoken, he could only brace himself and fight. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Small rock, you go help him." Ang! The rock spirit roared angrily, and pong pong pong, stomped heavily on the ground, fighting alongside Yuan Cheng He. Yuan Cheng He was instantly greatly reassured. He knew of the rock spirit's strength. Its power was at the spiritual infant tier, but its ability to withstand blows was definitely deity transformation tier level. With it as a meat shield, everything would be fine. Ling Han went on, "Hunyo, you take care of the other one?" "All right." Hunyo immediately jumped out. She was very unhappy that Xu Xian Er, the alluring woman, again hadn't been sold. "Brother Ling, Qian Qian also wants to fight," Wanren Qian Qian said. "All right." Ling Han nodded. Zhu Bai and Yang Chong were greatly infuriated. These few juniors actually dared to treat them like nothing and discuss how to divide them up, absolutely daring and ignorant. Hunyo charged up to Yang Chong, while Yuan Cheng He and the other two fought Zhu Bai together. Pong, pong, pong. The battles immediately started. Once the fight started, however, Zhu Bai and Yang Chong were visibly disconcerted. T. How come these juniors are so strong? Zhu Bai was all right. Yuan Cheng He and the other two were outstanding, but they didn't have deity transformation tier battle prowess, and completely relied on the rock spirit as a shield, enduring the majority of Zhu Bai's attacks. Wanren Qian Qian and Yuan Cheng were actually fighting in and out, and didn't dare to fight him head-on. This obviously allowed him to take the complete initiative, having a great advantage in fighting the three alone. Or this was how it should have been. When deity transformation tier warriors were against spiritual infant tier ones, even 1 against 100 was an effortless fight to them, but 2 youngsters and a puppet held him back, which shocked him greatly. If he was just shocked, then Yang Chong was frightened out of his wits. Hunyo was too fast. At the start, he'd obviously viewed Hunyo as a joke. Who would take a 7 to 8-year-old girl seriously? But once Hunyo attacked, he knew he'd definitely made an error in judgment. Xiu, 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 Hunyo turned into lightning and constantly flashed around him, punching with her small fist fiercely where he was unprepared to receive an attack. Defending with his shield formed by origin power, he still staggered from the blow. It couldn't be helped. He didn't know where Hunyo's fist was attacking from, and could only arrange origin power defense all over his body. With the origin power scattered all over, how could he rival Hunyo's full-powered punch? He wanted to counterattack. After all, Hunyo was only at the spiritual infant tier, and it would definitely be game over if he hit her once. However, the problem was here. He couldn't capture Hunyo's figure, and could only take a beating. Nyo's ultimate move, Invincible Spinning Punch. Super Groin Kick. A Chrysanthemum 2 kick. Then kick the balls, beat the eggs and the chicken flies. Hunyo attacked without scruples. Who could expect so much from a little girl? On top of her small body and attacking the 3 lower parts, Yang Chong's face turned green. If he were to be hit once, he would lose his virtue in old age. Zhu Bai and Yang Chong's strength were about the same, but their circumstances were of 2 different worlds. Ling Han looked towards Yu Xianing with a smile, and said, "I'm different from you. I only dislike one kind of person. Do you know what kind?" Chapter 712. Pummeled. Reverie _ Henyi. The 2 powerful hatchet men were actually entangled. Yu Xianying's expression was obviously somewhat pale, but he still wasn't alarmed, because Yu family's backing made him full of confidence. One family with 3 heaven-tier elites other than the 5 great sects, how many other forces could compare with it? Therefore, he was obviously calm and collected, believing that no matter how daring Ling Han was, he wouldn't dare attack him. The 7th Patriarch came here personally, but he was young and aggressive, wanting to venture alone, so he separated from the 7th Patriarch. Daring to attack him. You didn't want your life anymore. What upset him was that if these people couldn't be taken down, the treasured pearl and the fairy would have nothing to do with him. Yu Xianning said coldly, "Oh, what kind of person do you dislike? I'll listen for the time being." Ling Han said, "I dislike people who make me dislike them." This was a little roundabout, and to say it was to say nothing. Yu Xianning snorted and said, "You're provoking me?" "Provoking you?" Ling Han laughed and said, "You have too much respect for yourself. Who are you to deserve my provocation? I've got nothing to do, so might as well start with you. H*T, so you're provoking me." Yu Xianning said coldly, "Might as well tell you, my family's 7th Patriarch also entered the mystery realm, so if you don't want to die, hand over the treasured pearl immediately and leave this woman. And slap yourself 30 times and leave an arm." The more he looked at Ling Han, the more annoyed he became, because this guy put an arm around Xu Xian'er's slender waist, making him burn with envy. How domineering. Ling Han looked towards Li Fengyu with a smile and said, "Brother Li, how about I leave this guy for you to pummel?" "Sure, I'll definitely beat the crap out of him." Li Fengyu nodded. The corner of Xu Xian'er's and Li Zixian's mouths twitched, almost retching. "Brother, can you not be so disgusting?" Li Zixian said. They had been brazenly freeloading by Ling Han's side. If he made people feel revolted, what would they do if they weren't brought along to play? Li Fengyu laughed mischievously and took large strides towards Yu Xianning. He said, "Damned brat, you even dare to have ideas about my sister. If I don't beat you till you can't take care of yourself, I'll assume your surname." "Who had ideas about your sister? Don't you speak recklessly." "Humph, you court death." Yu Xianning was obviously fearless. Both were in the flower blossom tier, and he was a genius. What was a genius? Someone invincible in the same tier. He unleashed a long sword, which was a 6th tier spirit toolit was consistent with his tier, and he could unleash 90% of its power. In case of a spirit tool not nourished by oneself, with different martial intent, it would be impossible to unleash 100% of its power in the end. Li Fengyu laughed and waved his hand as he said, "You're no match for me." "Why?" Yu Xianning said in a low voice. His killing intent overflowingly big mouth's cheap mouth art was so amazing that Li Fengyu had already successfully replaced Ling Han as the person that Yu Xianning wanted to kill. "Because I've got a saber and a sword. Having one more saber than you, how could you possibly compare to me?" Li Fengyu said proudly, shaking his hands, and a sword and a saber appeared as expected. This. Yu Xianning was almost angered to death. This guy was actually teasing him? He roared angrily and brandished his sword at Li Fengyu. Xiu Xiu Xiu, 9 flashes of sword chi flew freely, their power not at all weak. As expected, being able to become the descendant the family focused on to nurture, his martial arts talent was quite amazing. 9 flashes of sword chi already approached the level of Ray, and considering that he was only in the flower blossom tier, it was indeed worthy of praise. Li Fengyu wasn't weak, either. As he struck with the saber and the sword, 5 flashes of sword chi and 4 flashes of saber chi were unleashed. The number of flashes equaled Yu Xianying's. Hong. They exchanged one blow and retreated more than 10 steps. Their expressions became cautious. An expert. They both thought, and became extremely careful. In an expert's fight, one wrong move and the whole game could be lost. Obviously, no one dared to let their guard down. Ding, 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 ding. They immediately started fighting again, their clash producing countless sparks. "You're very strong," Yu Xianning said. "But you're definitely no match for me." "You're not weak either," Li Fengyu said. "But you're definitely going to be beaten till you'll be searching for your teeth all over the ground." Ling Han sighed and said, "These two people really think themselves strong?" Xu Xian'er laughed faintly with her mouth covered, and said, "They're standing on a mountain and can only see the peak in front, but they don't know that they'll see an even higher peak after conquering this one." Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Xian'er's becoming more and more philosophical." The battles were fierce on all 3 sides, but Ling Han yawned. Except for Hu Niu's battle, which was somewhat worth watching, the others were truly dull. Niu's rising dragon punch. Hu Niu shouted in a sweet voice. Her small body soared upwards and she punched Yang Chong's chin, also sending this old man into the sky. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, along with 10 broken teeth. Pa! He lay on the ground with his eyes open, but only the whites of his eyes could be seen. Hu Niu had beaten his brain into mush with that punch, so he couldn't be any more dead than this. Aya, no more teeth. How will you eat meat in the future? Hu Niu tilted her head and thought for a while, then clapped her hands and said, Never mind, you're already dead anyway, no need to eat meat. Her wild nature had never faded, and she always had a murderous disposition. Once she attacked, it would naturally to kill. Old Yang! Zhu Bai cried out. Yang Chong, who was his equal, had actually died so easily in the hands of a little girl, making goosebumps rise all over his body and constricting even his heart. So Hu Niu's murderous disposition had been fully unleashed, and her eyes targeted Yu Xianning as she suddenly pounced on him. Blood spilled across the sky as Yu Xianning was instantly torn into many pieces, dying unintact. The little girl's gaze targeted Zhu Xian. She opened her mouth, the ominous glint in her eyes ablaze. Xiu, she charged over and reached out with her hands, her 10 fingers like tiger claws, emitting a chill. Ling Han hurriedly leapt backwards with Zhu Xian and said, Hu Niu, stop, don't think I don't know you're faking it. No fun. Hu Niu immediately withdrew the ominous glint and reverted to her cute look, pursing her lips. Can't Hu Niu take the opportunity to kill her? Zhu Xian felt a lingering fear. She'd thought Hu Niu had gone berserk, but it was only fake to kill her while she was lost in a frenzy. Seemed like she really was quite a threat in Hu Niu's mind. The butcher's knife must never be swung at one's own people. Got it? Ling Han said seriously. But she's not one of our own. Hu Niu protested and played with her fingers. Niu's only with Ling Han. Ling Han was speechless. The little girl's exclusive mindset was really shocking as it had never changed at all over the years. Yuan Chang he walked over and said apologetically, Young Master Han, that old man ran away. Still, he was somewhat proud on the inside. 3 spiritual infant tier beings acted together to chase away a deity transformation tier elite. This was an amazing accomplishment, and would definitely be something to brag about. Chapter 713. Admittance. Reverie _ Hen Yi. Ran away? Ling Han looked into the distance, but Zhu Bai had already disappeared without a trace. Even if he and Hu Niu chased him now, it was basically impossible to catch up. Earlier, it was precisely because Hu Niu had caused a scene that Zhu Bai seized the opportunity. Otherwise, if Ling Han and Hu Niu had been watching out for him, at least a deity transformation tier warrior like him definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. Yu family indeed is a powerful heaven tier force, and under the 5 great sects, they can rank as a first-grade force, one Ren Qian said, looking somewhat worried. 3 heaven tier elites in one family who dared to treat them lightly. Besides, Yu family's 7th ancestor also entered the historic site. If Zhu Bai were to tell the 7th ancestor about what happened here, then we're in big trouble, she continued. Ling Han was not afraid. He had the Black Tower, and at worst, he could temporarily hide from the trouble. With his progression speed, he could probably advance into the deity transformation tier at the end of the year, and killing normal heaven tier elites wouldn't be out of the question then. With Black Tower's power boost, he could even fight shattering void tier opponents. His gaze swept by everyone as he said, If heaven tier elites come, I do have a way to deal with them, but this involves my trump card. I'm thinking about whether I can trust you guys or not. Being glanced at one by one, everyone's hearts tensed up. Ling Han's gaze was filled with deterrent power, and his entire person emitted the aura of a king, making them subconsciously feel inferior. Ling Han paused and said, I'll show you guys a treasure, but the condition is that you guys must be of one mind and heart with me and never betray me. So those who want to keep going stay, and the rest can leave. His words were obviously aimed at the Li siblings, one Ren Qian, Yuan Cheng He, and the rabbit. The Li siblings looked at each other and were the first to declare their position. They said, We as brother and sister are willing to advance and retreat with young Master Han, riding on young Master Han's smoothly sailing ship. They didn't doubt in the least bit Ling Han's strength and potential. Yuan Cheng He also said, I am young Master Han's follower to begin with. The rabbit chewed on a spirit medicine and said, "You brat still owe Uncle Rabbit 2 dragon's blood over Lord Ginseng, so Uncle Rabbit obviously won't go." Only Wanren Qian was hesitant. She was also the genius of a region and had her own pride, rejecting Jia Ming who admired her without hesitation, so she obviously wouldn't easily make a promise. And seeing Ling Han's stance, which was clearly to take them as subordinates, it was something her sense of self-respect couldn't allow. She contemplated for a long while then said, "Brother Ling, I'll be leaving for now." Ling Han nodded, smiling and said, "We're friends, so if there's any troubles in the future, there's no harm in telling me. If it's accomplishable, I definitely won't decline." Wanren Qian was obviously overjoyed and said quickly, "Then thank you, Brother Ling." She nodded at everyone and then leapt up, flying fast into the distance. Ling Han took a glance at everyone and said, "I'll bring everyone to a place, don't resist my divine sense." Xiu, he brought everyone into the Black Tower. Ah. N. The 3 people and the rabbit all cried out in surprise. What was this place? It was definitely not the mystery realm earlier. Could it be that Ling Han could carry a small world with him? Ling Han smiled and said, "This is my spatial spirit tool. It can accommodate living beings." The 3 people instantly revealed shocked expressions. A spatial spirit tool that could accommodate living beings was unheard of. The rabbit gasped in astonishment and said, "Brat, this isn't a spirit tool, but a divine tool." "A divine tool?" Even Xu Xian cried out in surprise. "Correct." The rabbit nodded. "My ancient ancestor ascended into the divine realm, but long ago, there were still some special methods to communicate with the lower realm, so Uncle Rabbit also knows some things about the divine realm. A space that can accommodate living things. Only gods have the mighty ability to extract and refine it into a microscopic space that can be carried on one's body, and that is only doable by the mighty even amongst the gods. You guys can see, the mystery realm we were in earlier is actually also a separate space that can accommodate living beings, but it can't be carried away and is fixed at a certain location instead, layering on top of the normal space. To compress a small world into a mustard seed one is too difficult, and the larger the space, the harder it is to do. Normal space would squeeze against it, and the larger it is, the easier it is for it to collapse. So, our spatial rings are all very small." Everyone nodded. Normally speaking, spatial rings were only the size of a box, and those reaching the size of a house were extremely rare. They knew that the larger the space of the spirit tool, the harder it was to make it, but hadn't known the reason why it was so hard, and only now they finally understood. So, a mystery realm was always in a fixed place, unlike spatial rings that could be carried around. With it fixed in place, it would be like building a house. The foundation could be laid in advance, and then the walls could be strengthened that way, it wouldn't collapse easily. Everyone looked at the terrifying space of the Black Tower and gasped in astonishment. This was completely comparable to the size of a mystery realm. Only Ling Han knew that Black Tower space was larger than any mystery realms he'd ever seen, even larger than all of them added together. "It's definitely the handiwork of a god!" Everyone cried out in shock. Ling Han smiled. They only knew that the Black Tower space was large, but they didn't know Black Tower's special abilities. For example, planting spirit medicine and producing the essence of the earth, the essence of water, and even that Black Tower unleashing its might could destroy a realm. Black Tower was more than just a spatial divine tool. On the contrary, this was probably its least important feature. Such a divine tool, if put in the divine realm, it's guaranteed to be fought over, not to mention one with a space that large, the rabbit concluded. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "You say it as if you've been to the divine realm." The rabbit snorted. It wanted to brag, but seeing Hu Nio's fierce gaze sweep over, it instantly stopped. Ling Han said, "So, even if a shattering void tier elite charges over, I still have the ability to save myself. And our ambition is to split the skies." Split the skies? Yuan Chenghe and the Li siblings were all shocked. What was splitting the skies? Breaking open the skies and bringing the vast lands into the divine realm. Ling Han explained. What? Yuan Chenghe and the Li siblings were shocked numb. Did they hear wrong? This was too shocking. Bringing all the living spirits of an entire land into the divine realm. Could this be done? Splitting the skies is obviously very difficult, so everyone needs to cooperate and do their part, Ling Han said. He spoke roughly about founding a nation and splitting the skies, but didn't mention the conspiracy of the 5 great sections. Yuan Changhe and the Li siblings listened as their blood boiled. They were youngsters and obviously all had great ambition. And was there a greater cause in the world than splitting open the skies? Young Master Han, I'm willing to follow you. Yuan Changhe said loudly. He, brother-in-law, if you don't mind my getting in the way, I'm also willing to do what little I can, Li Fengyu said. Good. Ling Han was extremely pleased. Chapter 714. This is a beast garden. Reverie _ Henyi. Everyone exited the Black Tower and continued to advance. After 2 days, they'd finally left the sea area. The place ahead was another stretch of flatlands, with occasional large trees and sporadic mountain peaks. It was as if they went back to place on the other side of the sea, for the scenery was almost unchanged. Could the large sea be the center of this mystery realm? Have we come around again? Is the precious treasure hidden in the sea? Everyone began suspect. Xiao, at this moment, a black shadow swept by in the skies, and with a close look, it turned out it was actually a pavilion. It wasn't sent flying, but instead grew out 2 legs and pranced over on the earth, disappearing in an instant. T. Ling Han and the others looked at each other, speechless. A ghost, or had it become spiritual? A pavilion actually grew legs and ran. Are my eyes blurred? Li Fengyu wiped his eyes. You're probably not the only one having a hard time seeing, Ling Han said. It wasn't possible that everyone's eyes were all blurred. Xiao. At this moment, several more figures swept by the sky at a surprising speed. The Lunar King! Everyone cried out in surprise again. They recognized one of them that rode on a terrifying beast lion, which couldn't be any more obvious. Being able to stand side by side with the Lunar King, these people were probably all Shattering Void tier elites. Several great Shattering Void tier elites are chasing it together? That pavilion must contain surprising treasures, Yuan Changhe said. Unfortunately, it's been targeted by Shattering Void tier elites, so there's no way we'll have any share. Li Fengyu sighed. With a smile, Ling Han said, that may not be the case. Opportunities don't have much to do with cultivation, and if these Shattering Void tier elites can obtain the treasures inside the pavilion, then wouldn't they have gotten it long ago? That's right, we may be able to obtain a share. Li Fengyu was excited again. But, a pavilion that can grow legs and run, this is too strange, right? Zhu Xian'er said. Li Fengyu nodded repeatedly, and said, maybe it'll eat all of us. Ling Han said, forget it, don't think about this problem now. Even Shattering Void tier elites can't catch up with it, let alone us. If it is to be, then this pavilion will appear in front of us. If it isn't to be, hee. Well, such a treasure was not something that they could obtain just by thinking about it. Their thoughts down to earth, the first thing was obviously not to hasten on their journey, but to eat a good meal. Ling Han took out a section of the tentacle beast's tentacle and refined it with might to make it shrink, condensing the essence. He then added precious medicine from the Black Tower to boil it together. The most precious was the Myrietes precious pearl, which Ling Han scraped to get some powder, which he placed in the pot. As it boiled, clear red clouds rose up as if they were boiling a divine beast's meat. The aroma permeated the air, making Xu Niu and the gold-seeking rat jump up and down. Even the rabbit began to eat secretly along with them. After half a day, the pot of precious soup was finally finished, and everyone had a bowl ladled out to them. There were propagating vein-like patterns rising in the soup as if heaven and earth was revealing its profound secrets. This was a perfectly tonic soup. Niu wants 2 bowls. No, 3 bowls. Xu Niu hadn't started eating and was already contending for food. Ji. The gold-seeking rat jumped on Ling Han's shoulder and squeaked, meaning, this baby also wants 3 bowls. Ling Han shrugged and said, everyone gets 1 bowl first, and those who can still drink, ladle out more yourselves. Everyone was full of ambition. How could a bowl of such a tonic soup be enough? But once 1 bowl was down the stomach, except for Ling Han and Xu Niu, everyone's bodies were gushing with multicolored light and their faces all red. How could they possibly take on a second bowl? Since everyone couldn't eat more, Ling Han and Xu Niu didn't even use a bowl. They surrounded the pot, scooped up the soup, and ate the meat, making the others call out for their freakishness. This pot of soup was greatly beneficial to progressing in their cultivation, and which medicine wasn't a great one. Eating it directly nourished their Tao flower and the spiritual infant, carving down vein-like patterns. The speed of growth was shockingly fast. In less than half a year, I can break through to the spiritual infant tier. Xu Xiu Ran said, pleasantly surprised. She always worried because her cultivation was lower than Ling Han's, and her battle prowess was very much inferior as well, so she was unable to help Ling Han. Advancing into the spiritual infant tier, she finally wouldn't need to watch from the sidelines every time. The Li siblings and Yuan Changhe's gains were also great, making them unable to contain their joy. After resting, they departed again. This was still a paradise for beasts, with various powerful beasts emerging one after another. Most of them were in the spiritual infant and the deity transformation tier, and there were even a dozen heaven tier ones. Shattering void tier ones weren't seen for the time being, but that couldn't be a guarantee that there wasn't any. It was surprising. In one mystery realm, they actually saw 2 shattering void tier beasts, though not very powerful, and one already had been subdued by the Lunar King. Against other people, shattering void tier beasts would crush them overwhelmingly. After another 2 days, they finally walked out of this area. A stone door appeared in front, and looking back after passing through it, 2 words could be seen on it. Beast Garden. This is some ancient forces beast garden, a place where beast pets are bred. Everyone was frightened by such immense handiwork. Experts like them had to take 10 days just to pass through a beast garden. This was only to pass through it, and not to stroll through the entire area. The level of beasts is restricted by bloodline, and since they can reach the Shattering Void tier now, then their ancestors should have also been in the Shattering Void tier when they were bred here, Ling Han said. This was the most frightening aspect. This force could capture Shattering Void tier beasts and breed them. Why did this sound so much like dreaming? Only the ancient dynasty that sought to split the skies could be so bold and powerful, Ling Han thought. That ancient dynasty had once united all of the lands, but still fell short in the end, unable to split the skies. No wonder Shattering Void elites were in such a rush. This is extremely like to be the location of the imperial city of that ancient dynasty. Mystical treasures. Everyone felt as if they were on pins and needles. This was a genuine treasure vault of an ancient dynasty. They advanced in a hurry, but after the flatlands was a desert with a boundless expanse of yellow sand everywhere. If it weren't for the fireball that never changed position in the sky, they would be very likely to have lost their way. Like this, they went on for 3 more days, and suddenly a palace appeared in front of them. The residence of the ancient emperor. After they walked over, they then discovered that it wasn't so. The plaque on the palace gates had the 2 words, Tool Pavilion, written on it. As the name implied, Tool Pavilion was obviously a place where treasured tools were kept. There were many people around the palace. The treasure was clearly in front of them, but they didn't go further. There was only one possibility. They were obstructed and couldn't enter. Ling Han and the others walked over, and after asking a few people, they found out that there was a metal puppet keeping watch by the Tool Pavilion's entrance. To enter the building, one had to pass its test first. Forcibly charging through without passing its test, one would only be killed on the spot. What test? Chapter 715. Leaving one's name on a stone tablet. Reverie _ Henyi. The test was very simple, and it wasn't to fight this puppet. One only had to place one's palm on a stone tablet, and if a light shined, one would qualify to enter the Tool Pavilion. It sounded easy, but there was only a meager lot that could make the stone tablet light up. Other than the powerful figures of the older generation, only Yao Huiyu, Xu Xiu Ran, Dong Linger, and a few others could do so. There were still newly arrived people who asked curiously, "You just put your hand on the stone tablet?" Of course not. You have to meditate on all your arts and skills in your consciousness, and the stone tablet will magnify the powers of these mystic techniques to their extremes, thereby evaluating your extreme battle prowess, a gaffer said. This is a martial arts stone, a treasure in the legends. Even if you're only at the flower blossom tier, you might surpass Shattering Void tier elites because this evaluation is extreme battle prowess, or in other words, placing everyone's tier on the same level and then making a battle prowess comparison. Such a ranking should be called a ranking of potential. It's possible that you can't even reach close to this level in the future, and it's also possible that you'll have a fortuitous meeting and surpass it in the future. It's all uncertain. The gaffer said, see that, the stone tablet has 100 names. If your extreme battle prowess can surpass any of theirs, you can rank amongst them. The stronger your battle prowess is predicted to be in the future, the higher you can rank. However, although this mystery realm opened for the first time in several 10 millennia, it's extremely like that this martial arts stone has recorded all the geniuses in the near 1,000 millennia, and even several thousand millennia. Being able to leave a name on there, even if it's only the last name, they all are super geniuses of several tens of millennia. Hearing the gaffer's words, everyone was somewhat excited. If they could leave their name on the tablet, then wouldn't it mean surpassing the ancients and amazing the contemporaries? But the difficulty was too high. Some had already entered the tool pavilion, but none of them left their name on the stone tablet. Ling Han looked over. The person ranked first on the stone tablet was actually called First. Who knew where he got his courage from, assuming that he would be the first and never the last? The second name was much more modest, Yuan Shi. The third name was Si Feng, the fourth name was Yu Ying, the fifth name was Yu, the seventh name was Mo, the eighth name was Ming Dao, the ninth name was Donkey Riding Old Man, and the 10th name was Zhou Dao. Ling Han looked all the way down. Each name was extremely foreign to him. However, when he came to the 99th name, a familiar name finally jumped into the eye. The Lunar King. He was shocked. Had the Lunar King left this just now, or was it several tens of millennia ago? If it was the latter, would the Purple Moon Empire and this ancient dynasty be somehow connected? Ling Han was absorbed in thought for a moment. Only when Zhu Xian called him a few times did he come back to his senses. Let's go try. They pushed their way through the crowd, trying to squeeze to the front. Some people were easygoing. They had already tried and failed, and didn't mind letting others try. However, some people were bad-tempered and even envious. Since they couldn't get in, they didn't want others to go in, either. There was no need to be polite to such people. Ling Han simply attacked, Xiu, 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 and a road-blocking dog was waved away like a scarecrow. Wang in front, the stone tablet lit up, which meant someone passed the test and could enter the tool pavilion. That's Wanren Qian Qian. As expected of the proud daughter of heaven. It said her strength is second only to Dong Linger's, and sure enough. Tisk, do you know what sort of light appeared when Dong Linger passed? I don't know. I'll tell you then. The martial arts stone can only let out light in 3 colors. One's red, one's green, and one's purple. Among them, purple light represents the weakest battle prowess, while red light is the strongest. Just now, Wanren Qian Qian actuated purple light. But Dong Linger activated red light. With that said, everyone nodded their heads. While also a proud daughter of heaven, Wanren Qian Qian was still a large distance away from Dong Linger. Brother Ling. Seeing Ling Han, Wanren Qian Qian couldn't help but stop and didn't enter the tool pavilion immediately. Such a short while didn't matter anyway. She wanted to personally see Ling Han's extreme battle prowess. Although this didn't represent the heights that Ling Han could reach in the future, it could still be used as reference. Ling Han nodded in a greeting. Jia Ming's here. Everyone dispersed. This was a vicious god that killed without scruples, but he was Earth Dragon's sect's most valued disciple of the next generation. Who would dare to harm him even in self-defense? Jia Ming walked over with large strides. A terrifying aura rose all over his body, turning into giant snakes. Ling Han frowned. Jia Ming's cultivation had made an astonishing leap and reached the deity transformation tier. He'd once said that the Great Sea had something fortunate for him, and it indeed seemed so if it was enough for him to advance into the deity transformation tier in a few days. Amongst the younger generation, currently, only Xu Xiu Ran had done it. However, wasn't the Earth Dragon an earthworm? So why did the majority of Earth Dragon sex people manifest the shadow of a large snake? Although they were all long and twisted things, there was still a big difference between snakes and earthworms, right? Jia Ming's walked majestically, his aura as if an ancient brutish beast was hidden in his body, extremely terrifying. As the earth roared, he walked to the front of the martial arts stone. He first gave Ling Han a murderous look, and then stretched out his hand and pressed towards the martial arts stone. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately lit up. Purple light. However, Jia Ming didn't withdraw his hand and continued to press. The color that the martial arts stone emitted changed to green. His meant that Jia Ming's extreme battle prowess improved, which was very normal. Pressing one's hand on the tablet, one needed to perform one's own mystic arts, and after the martial arts stone accepted it and continued to extrapolate, the evaluated extreme battle prowess would then be displayed again. Therefore, one's highest battle prowess couldn't be exceeded, but couldn't be concealed. Hee, my battle prowess will break the ancients and the contemporaries. Jia Ming shouted loudly as qi and blood surged all over his body, forming terrifying pressure. Hong, the people nearby fell onto the ground, unable to withstand the impact. Ling Han's expression turned stern. His and Jia Ming's strengths were originally almost on par. Now that Jia Ming crossed into the deity transformation tier, Ling Han would definitely be inferior except in terms of physical arts. If Jia Ming's battle prowess skyrocketed to the heaven tier, then Ling Han would really be in trouble. It turned red. My goodness! Everyone cried out with their hands on their heads. An exceptional genius as expected, making the martial arts stone display a red color and sharing the limelight with Ling Donger and Xu Xiu Ran. Ah! Jia Ming roared again, the veins on his forehead popped, and the shadow of a giant snake surfaced behind him, letting out hissing sounds. Wang, the martial arts stone displayed a black light. The 100 names all disappeared, and the stone tablet showed the words, "Leave a name." Jia Ming's strength reached the level comparable to the ancient geniuses, and he could rank in the top 100. Chapter 716. Lighting up with each step. Reverie _ Henyi. Everyone cried out in surprise. It was too shocking. With so many ancient prodigies, only 100 people could leave their names, and all of them were geniuses amongst geniuses. Taking anyone out casually could astonish through the ages, right? Jia Ming being able to leave his name. He was too strong. This was something that Dong Linger and Xu Xiu Ran couldn't do. Jia Ming smiled proudly and wrote down his name on the stone tablet swiftly and boldly. Instantly, the stone tablet let out a dazzling light again, and the 100 names reappeared. Jia Ming's name shockingly ranked in the 97th place, while the original 100th place couldn't be seen anymore. The 97th place, higher than the Lunar King by 3 places. Now, the Lunar King already dropped to the 100th place. Jia Ming was somewhat astonished, seeming to be somewhat displeased by this record, but he immediately revealed a smile at the corner of his lips and took a few steps back, sweeping Ling Han with his gaze and revealing a contemptuous look. Having a name on the ranks, what did this mean? It was to be equals with the strongest historical geniusesto be a super freak that came once in several tens of millennia. Qian Qian. Jia Ming looked towards Wenren Qian Qian, his expression proud, which meant look at my freakishness, come grovel at my feet now. Although Wenren Qian Qian was shocked inside, she disliked Jia Ming's proud personality even more. Geniuses indeed could be proud, but proud to the point of looking at everyone from above. This was repugnant. She focused her beautiful eyes on Ling Han. This was also a freak who might have a shocking performance. Zhu Xian Yuan Cheng He, and the others walked up separately, undergoing the test one by one. Without surprise, although the Li siblings qualified to enter the Restore Heaven Academy, they didn't cause the reaction of the martial arts stone. Only Zhu Xian and Yuan Cheng He succeeded, but they both summoned the purple-colored light, equaling Wenren Qian Qian. However, this wasn't a test of their martial arts talent or aptitude, but simply the maximization of the arts they currently grasped, placing them in the same tier for comparison and ranking. So one didn't have to care too much about activating the martial arts stone, since there was still a chance to catch up in the future. Besides, this was a ranking that took martial arts skill and techniques and extrapolated them to the extreme, but even geniuses might not be able to achieve the said extreme. The rabbit also went for a try. Quite surprisingly, it actually activated a red light, and could rank alongside Xu Xiu Ran and Dong Linger. However, this was not necessarily the rabbit's full power, and Dong Linger and Xu Xiu Ran also might not have operated their strongest martial arts skill. After all, everyone only needed the qualification to enter, and many people weren't willing to reveal their secrets. Ling Han, I'll let you live a little longer. After you take the test, I'll kill you then. Jia Ming laughed loudly and said, I'll show you the gap between you and me and have you die with regret. This is the result of going against me. You can't fight here, right? Someone whispered. Yes, fighting isn't allowed. That puppet will step in and directly kill those who don't heed the warning. Earlier, there was someone who suffered, someone else added. Jia Ming came late, so he doesn't know. Although voices of such discussion were small, Jia Ming, with his strength, couldn't possibly not hear it, immediately revealing an irritated look. He'd put out big talk yet couldn't do it. Wasn't this a fierce slap across the face? Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and shake his head, walking in large strides to the martial arts stone. He said, "A frog at the bottom of a well. What's so hard about simply making the ranks?" Such high-sounding sentiments, then I'll wait and see, Jia Ming said coldly. Ling Han pressed his hand and used the desolate hell sword, but the martial arts stone didn't react at all. Apparently, this set of sword techniques extrapolated to the extreme couldn't quality to receive the martial arts stone's recognition. Ha! Jia Ming scoffed. Hold your horses, such a grown man yet so impatient. Ling Han sneered. Jia Ming instantly wanted to kill someone. He'd lived in the wild for a long time, fighting and killing beasts all day. Killing people and killing beasts were no different to him. Whatever made him displeased, he would want to kill. However, when he saw the metal puppet that guarded the premise at the gate, he snorted and suppressed the killing intent within. For now, he couldn't beat this puppet, carved with extremely complex formation patterns, which were definitely of the 10th tier. Oh, then you'd better hurry. Don't take the latrine pit and take a such asterisk tea and keep the people behind waiting, he said insipidly. Barbarian. Ling Han scowled. No wonder you've always been a savage, and I don't expect that you could be civilized. However, the most important thing is to know oneself, and you clearly have no culture and still shout like a loudspeaker all day, polluting the environment everywhere. Pooh, many people instantly burst out laughing, but covered their mouths immediately in fear that Jia Ming would hold a grudge. Jia Ming was in the deity transformation tier and definitely an extremely powerful warrior in the deity transformation tier. Only shattering void tier and heaven tier elites could suppress him. However, how many elites like this could there be in the world, and how many would dare not give the 5 great sects face to suppress him? Jia Ming indeed had the right to run amok. Ling Han changed to operating the 3 styles of black origin in his consciousness. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately lit up, but it was only the most normal colors, purple light. This moved Ling Han slightly. This sword technique of the Heaven Sword sect could only make the martial arts stone emit the lowest level light of recognition. This sword technique was extremely remarkable. The last move, breaking limits, needed sword heart to actuate, which showed its high level. But as the martial arts stone saw it, this only passed the first stage of recognition. Tisk! Jia Ming sneered again. He obviously knew that Ling Han's strength could definitely cause the reaction of the martial arts stone, and even equal Xu Xiu Ran and Ling Donger. Purple light was not something strange at all. However, he definitely didn't think that Ling Han could leave his name on the ranking. This was too difficult, and probably only one person from each generation could rise into the list, and the further in the future, the more difficult it would be because there were already too many geniuses before them. Wenren Qian and Zhu Xian were more nervous. They obviously hoped that Ling Han could suppress Jia Ming, and with the slight changes in their faces and gazes, Jia Ming's killing intent flourished even more. Ling Han also activated the Eye of Truth, and instantly, the light that the martial arts stone emitted changed from purple to green, entering the 2nd level. Hiss, this guy's also a genius, to actually be able to activate green light. No wonder he's targeted by Jia Ming. You're excited too easily. Don't you know he's Restore Heaven Academy's Ling Han? What, that heaven-grade alchemist? Who else other than him? What a true monster, attaining such accomplishments in alchemy, and being just as terrifying in martial arts, absolutely inhuman. Everyone cried out one after another. This was unimaginable to them, so they obviously thought it strange. Jia Ming was obviously displeased and gave a loud snort. Instantly, the whispers in the surroundings all disappeared. Now, there really wasn't anyone who dared to offend him. Even the older elites weren't willing to make an enemy of him. He was a youngster filled with potential, and would definitely become a shattering void tier elite in the future. Besides, the Earth Dragon sect stood behind him, and they couldn't kill him while he was still undeveloped, so they definitely couldn't offend him. Chapter 717. Rank 1. Reverie _ Hen Yi. Ling Han smiled and performed the thunderclap ninth heaven in his consciousness. Wang, the light that the martial arts stone emitted immediately changed from green to red. Seeing this scene, Jia Ming's expression was somewhat grave. If Ling Han could be a little stronger, he might really be able to leave his name on the martial arts stone. Ling Han no longer performed the 3 styles of black origin, and instead operated the annihilating dragon star arrow. When the 3 mystical powers were used simultaneously, his divine sense turned into a small person and flickered like lightning inside the consciousness, firing out annihilating dragon star arrow. It couldn't be helped. The 3 styles of black origin and the annihilating dragon star arrow were conflicting with each other and couldn't be executed simultaneously. Otherwise, operating 10 heaven grade sword techniques simultaneously could at least rival 3 styles of black origin and other such ultimate moves, right? Wang, the light that the martial arts stone emitted changed again from red to black. Instantly, the stone tablets' names all disappeared, and the words reappeared again. Leave a name. This explained that Ling Han's future battle prowess could surpass past geniuses and squeeze into top 100. I'm about to go crazy. Another genius that could surpass ancient geniuses appeared again. Did my eyes go blurry? Such a genius should only appear once in a generation. What's going on? 2 mighty geniuses side by side. Would the future be their power struggle? Not necessarily. This is just their extreme battle prowess in the future, and not what's guaranteed to be achieved. Besides, Xu Xiu Ran and Dong Ling are definitely held back. They're definitely no weaker than Jia Ming. That's right. There's also Heaven's Sword Sect's Small Sword Emperor and Azure Thunder Sect's Son of Lightning who haven't come. They're no weaker, either. Everyone spoke one after another, but this didn't cover Ling Han's limelight. He was a freak that could contend with the 5 great sect's strongest geniuses. Ling Han casually wrote down his name, and in a short while, the martial arts stone changed. His name rose into the list, while Lunar King's name was squeezed out of the top 100. Rank 78th. This record moved everyone visibly, and made Jia Ming's expression pale, but it was also somewhat unacceptable for Ling Han. 3 mystical powers executed together actually only ranked 78th. It wasn't his lower tier that resulted in low rank. The mystical powers were extrapolated to the extreme or compared in the same tier. In the ancient times, there were still 77 geniuses that were still above him. Hiss, how many mystical powers did these guys grasp? Ling Han was shocked inside, but his confidence didn't suffer a hit, because this wasn't his complete battle prowess, or rather potential. He still hadn't executed 9 Dragons Tyrant Body Art and Indestructible Heaven's Scroll, which weren't conflicting with each other and could be executed together. Especially the Indestructible Heaven's Scrollet was the scripture that the Black Tower passed down. Whatever, he didn't have to be number 1 in history. Ling Han retreated a few steps, smiled at Jia Ming, and said, "Frog at the bottom of a well, have you gained some knowledge and experience yet?" 78th versus 97th was, of course, an absolute crush. Get out the way. Jia Ming walked over and pressed his right hand on the martial arts stone again. I didn't even use my full power earlier. What? Everyone was greatly shocked and in disbelief. Being able to squeeze into the top 100 throughout history actually wasn't done with his full strength? How freakish was this guy really? Was this going to be heaven-defying? Jia Ming stood still, but his black hair stood on ends, soaring towards the sky as if there was wind blowing from below, each strand of hair fluttering in the wind. A great snake's shadow appeared behind him again, but it was transforming from a flat and pointed snake head to a circular head as if it had become an earthworm. This wasn't a normal earthworm. It was as if a divine beast from the beginning of the world, emitting a primitive presence. The veins on his forehead throbbed constantly, each muscle trembling, and the power of his body was so terrifying as if a light punch could shatter a mountain, overturn a sea, and even strike down the stars in the sky. Wang, black light reappeared on the martial arts stone, but this time, the words "leave a name" didn't appear. Instead, Jia Ming's name improved from 97th to 51th place. What mystic art did he use to surpass nearly 50 ancient geniuses? Although it was only around 50 places, how many years and generations of geniuses was that the accumulation of? What he surpassed was generation after generation. Everyone felt as if they were on pins and needles. What sort of freak was this? But, seeing the 50 names above Jia Ming was even more terrifying. These names had remained the same throughout the ages, and just how powerful were they at the time? Even Ling Han somewhat at a loss for words. In other words, when Jia Ming extrapolated the mystic arts he'd grasped to the extreme, he could even surpass 3 mystical powers. Ha 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 ha. Jia Ming let go, took a few steps back, and looked disdainfully at Ling Han. Now, who's the frog at the bottom of the well? Parroted and unoriginal. Ling Han shook his head. You think that you're the only one who held back? Toad, move out the way. This time I'll make you totally convinced. Jia Ming's body shivered involuntarily. Could Ling Han also have held back? Impossible. Impossible. Charging all the way to 78th place, how could he possibly have held back? He was definitely pretending, definitely. Ling Han reached out with his hand and pressed it on the martial arts stone, operating indestructible heaven's scroll only. Hong, black light was immediately emitted from the stone, and Ling Han's rank skyrocketed. 60, 50, 40, 30, it was so fast that it was like fireworks. Even Ling Han himself was shocked, because he'd only operated a part of indestructible heaven's scroll, and not all of it. Moreover, he'd only grasped the first layer of the indestructible heaven's scroll. 20, 10, 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1. He went straight to first place, knocking off first, that was in first place. Unprecedented, the world's number 1. T. Motherfuck. Everyone began to shout obscenities, completely unable to believe it. This was too shocking, directly crushing all geniuses throughout the ages and ranking first. Was it possible that Ling Han would become the most powerful person in the history of the vast lands? Ling Han didn't continue to operate the indestructible heaven scroll. Since he'd already charged up to number 1, there was no meaning in continuing. He retracted his hand with a smile and said, Sorry, I'm usually low-key, and suddenly being high-profile for once, I don't feel too well. Everyone was speechless. No matter how fake it sounded, Ling Han's potential was plain to see. If he could really push the mystic art he grasped to the extreme, his battle prowess would be the strongest ever. The eyes of all the women present had lit up. The first in history. Who didn't want to become the wife of the first in history? Such a title was also full of temptation. Jia Ming's expression was pale. He'd originally wanted to completely suppress Ling Han, but, unexpectedly, he helped Ling Han and became a stepping stone. After all, without him as a comparison, who would know the bearing of being number 1? Now that it was clear. Besides, he was only at the 51st place after struggling desperately, which was how many ranks away from Ling Han? Chapter 718. Another number 1. Reverie _ Henyi. Jia Ming immediately calmed his mind. This was only the height that Ling Han could reach in the future, and did not represent that his current battle prowess wasn't a match for Ling Han's. It was quite the contrary. His had a fortuitous meeting in the sea, and his cultivation rocketed to the deity transformation tier. His current battle prowess definitely crushed Ling Han's. Once he had the chance, he would definitely kill Ling Han. Niu wants to try. Niu wants to try. Xu Niu ran over, tittering with joy. This seemed very amusing to her. Ha 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 ha. Some people immediately laughed loudly. What was a small little girl doing, butting in? Don't underestimate her. She entered the Restore Heaven Academy based on her own strength, and even defeated many experts. Someone knew Xu Niu's background. Pooh, this instantly made even more people spurt out air from their mouths in shock. She, a little girl 7 to 8 years of age? Was that possible? Small little girl, don't butt in and get out of this lord's way. An old man was displeased and obstructed the way. Earlier, he'd tolerated it, but a little girl also wanted to cut in line? He couldn't tolerate it. How dare you block Niu's path? Xu Niu was infuriated and immediately punched with her small fist. Send you flying. A small little girl dares to be impudent in front of this lord? The old man attacked, snatching at Xu Niu's neck. He was going to toss Xu Niu away. However, Xu Niu's figure flashed and immediately disappeared from under his hand, and she was already behind him when she reappeared, throwing a kick. Pang, the old man was kicked, flying magnificently out of the crowd, and landed on the surrounding yellow sand. Damn it! The old man was embarrassed. To be kicked on the butt and sent flying by a little girl, would he still have the face to see people in the future? He immediately charged back, but before attacking, he was grabbed by a metal puppet as if a chick seized by an eagle, having no power to fight back. He struggled and shouted, "Why only catch this lord?" Yes, everyone also wanted to ask. Attacking was prohibited here, and the metal puppet would immediately stop whomever attacked anyone, but now? Clearly, Xu was the one who attacked first, so why didn't the puppet stop her, but instead restrain the victim? Xu glared and said, "Big monster, you dare to seize Xu?" The metal puppet actually took a step back as if it feared her. Everyone just wanted to hold their heads and shout. How is this possible? The puppet, something completely without feeling, didn't know fear, so why would it feel fear facing Xu? Xu laughed loudly and walked to the martial arts stone with hands on her hips. Just as she reached her small hand out, she was annoyed and said angrily, "Damn it, it's too high." She had to stand on the tips of her toes and stretch out her arm to reach it. Everyone couldn't help but smile. This little girl was quite merry. Xu jumped directly onto the martial arts stone. Everyone saw this as greatly disrespectful since the names of geniuses throughout the ages were left on there. But even the metal puppet showed no reaction, so what were they getting stirred up for? Xu placed her small hand on the stone tablet, but there was no reaction at all. Not to mention a black light. Even the purple light didn't emerge. She was infuriated and said, "This broken rock's damaged." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Treat this stone as your enemy, and then in your head, think of how you'll beat it up." "So that's how it works." Xu giggled and closed her eyes. She pouted, looking like she was clenching her teeth in anger. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately lit up and black light rose directly, turning into the words, "Leave a name." *T. Another freak that could leave a name on the list. What was going on? There were already 2 freaks, one of which ranked first throughout history, and now, a little girl of 7 to 8 years of age could also enter the ranking? Such a little girl, what mystic arts could she possibly know? Sigh, could they even call themselves geniuses, even falling short of a little girl? Xu scrawled on the stone tablet, leaving the words, "Ling Han is Nyo's." She giggled and took a few steps back contentedly, admiring her own masterpiece. She said, "Ling Han, are Nyo's words beautiful?" "Beautiful like they're dancing," Ling Han said with a smile. The black light faded, and everyone immediately started to search for where Ling Han is Nyo's would rank. They all started from the last place, but in the 90s, it wasn't there. In the 80s, it wasn't there. In the 70s, it wasn't there. No, they couldn't see the words from all the way. "You guys, look at the first row," someone said in a quavering voice. Everyone looked towards the stone tablet's first row and shockingly saw Ling Han is Nyo's at the first place, pushing down Ling Han, who had just risen to the first place. The original first, now dropped to the 3rd place, appearing somewhat awkward. The original first ranking first was extremely awe-inspiring, and now that it ranked 3rd, though it was still rare in the past and present, it didn't live up to its reputation and became a laughingstock. Everyone looked back and forth between Xu and the name on the stone tablet, and just couldn't connect the number 1 battle prowess throughout the ages with this little girl. They were still in shock with Ling Han breaking history and honorably rising to number 1 in battle prowess. The first shock hadn't faded, yet another arose, making them somewhat numb. Was it a dream? It just seemed too unreal. "Yay, Nyo's first place!" Xu shouted excitedly. Ming's face turned green. Forget that he couldn't beat Ling Han, but even a little girl's future battle prowess was above his. How could he accept it? His confidence was going to be blown. This was really too great of a blow. Ling Han didn't find it strange at all. It was very likely that an extremely terrifying existence was hidden in Xu body. So what if she crushed all the geniuses through the ages? And he also didn't fully operate indestructible heaven's scroll, so it was normal to be below Xu. He obviously wouldn't contend with Xu. With a smile he said, "Come on, let's ignore that toad and go in and have a look." "Okay." Xu held Ling Han's hand, and as one adult and one child walked towards the tool pavilion, the metal puppet stepped aside as if to show respect. Zhu Xian'er and Yuan Cheng he followed behind, feeling the limelight on their faces and extremely proud. Everyone was astonished because those who passed the test all went around the puppet. Could this be the special treatment for those who left their names on the ranking list? Brother Ling. Wenren Chen caught up in a hurry, her eyes sparkling. This time, she really wanted to get to know Ling Han and talk a little. First of all time, no, the first two of all time. Jia Ming snorted and walked towards the tool pavilion, also trying to walk in imposingly, but that puppet blocked him, and had no intention of moving aside. Jia Ming almost exploded with anger. Everyone made it into the ranking, so why didn't he have special treatment as well? He had to walk around, his expression livid. Too fucking unfair. Chapter 719, Formation Sword. Reverie _ Henyi. After entering the tool pavilion, they were in a hall with stairs leading to the second floor on both sides. Judging from the height of this floor, the tool pavilion was probably 5 stories tall. What weapon do you use? A voice sounded next to Ling Han's ear. Ling Han was startled and said to everyone, "Did you guys all hear that sound?" "I heard it. It asked me what weapon I use," everyone said. Ling Han nodded and said, "Sword." Xiu, just as he'd finished speaking, his figure disappeared from the hall and appeared in a sealed room. The door was tightly shut, and it seemed that he was directly teleported in here. For an ancient dynasty, such a method wasn't unusual. Ling Han didn't panic. By the looks of it now, everyone was transported to a different room because of the different weapons they used. However, why weren't the ones who used swords together? This probably had to do with their record. The better their record, the more advanced the room they could enter. He looked around and saw an empty stone room. In the middle of it was a stone table with a sword in a scabbard. Even if the sword was not out of its sheath, Ling Han could sense a terrifyingly vicious chi hitting his face. It was full of danger. A swordsman's weapon. Ling Han was shocked. It wasn't like he'd never seen treasured sword. She even had a 10th tier spirit tool in his hand, but just from this vicious chi alone, the demon birth sword was far from being comparable to this sword. It was like this sword had been made for killing. Ling Han walked over, but when he was 3 meters away, this sword popped out of its sheath, leaving roughly 30 centimeters, and wang, 7 sword lights intertwined and charged towards him. The power of these sword lights was only at the spiritual infant tier, which was the same as his tier. Ling Han was obviously unafraid, and crossed his arms in front of him to take this blow head on. Pooh! His body was forced back a distance of 7 steps, and 7 wounds shockingly appeared on his arms, gushing out red blood. Ling Han couldn't help but be greatly surprised. What was his physique? It was comparable to 8th tier rare metals. Theoretically, it was very hard for even deity transformation tier attacks to deal damage to him. But this was only 7 spiritual infant tier sword lights, yet they made him bleed. How could this not be surprising? Power didn't represent battle prowess, and represented destructive power even less. Ling Han knew this very well. For example, using the same power, if one hit wood with an iron rod, compared to hitting wood with an axe, would damage dealt be equal? Power was only a part of it. Ling Han revealed a smile. He wanted this sword, so he had to conquer this sword first. Interesting. He was in the spiritual infant tier, so this sword could only display spiritual infant tier power, fighting him on the same tier. However, battle prowess was uncertain. This sword light was filled with destructive power, and if his physique was still at the iron sheet tier, forcibly taking that blow would definitely have severed his arm, or even his entire body. Like him, at the spiritual infant tier, yet it could kill those in the deity transformation tier. Haha, fighting in the same tier? Then let's compare. Ling Han charged out. He was quite interested in this sword. Could it also be a 10th tier spirit tool, being able to strike out such fierce sword light? Xiu, flash after flash, sword light shot out, striking him. Ling Han swung his fists to parry. The sword lights were truly fierce, the power of each reaching peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, and its lethality far surpassed even his physique could be injured, but that was all. He cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and his physique was like an indestructible diamond. He stared at that sword. There were many patterns on the blade, but they weren't martial intent, they were formation patterns. Although his formation level hadn't improved much, it wasn't hard to make such a judgment.
This wasn't a spirit tool, but a formation's eye.
Ling Han was really shocked this time.
Could this sword be a formation that was taking the initiative to attack him?
Pu. Blood constantly splashed across his body. This formation sword was really too terrifying, cutting him so that he bled ceaselessly and couldn't get close. He activated the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven and used the Demon Fairy Step, no longer fighting the sword lights recklessly. This would bring no results. In terms of power, this sword was at the advantage, and he would only be knocked back. Xiu, the sword lights shot out, but Ling Han traveled freely through the gaps between them, steadily approaching the sword. When Ling Han was only a step away from this sword, the entire blade popped out of its sheath, and a dazzling light instantly soared into the sky, its baleful presence ablaze. With each sword light repeated 7 times, a total of 49 flashes of sword light shot out simultaneously and intertwined into a dense web, forcing Ling Han back again. Apparently, pressured by Ling Han, this sword also unleashed stronger might. Its power was still in the spiritual infant tier, but its destructive power increased by a whole lot. Ling Han's arm was struck by the sword once again. This time, the wound was much deeper, almost to the bone. The sword was suspended in the sky as if an invisible hand was controlling it. Then, the sword point pointed at Ling Han and emitted a threatening chill. What level formation is this exactly? Ling Han stared at the blade's formation patterns. He couldn't recognize this formation at all, and only 2 things were certain. Firstly, its power was terrifyingly large, and if it exploded with full power, it could probably kill shattering void tier elites. Secondly, this formation was flawed and incomplete. Too shocking, an incomplete formation had such power. Then how terrifying would it be when repaired? I'll make you submit. Ling Han felt a rush of haughtiness and unleashed the demon birth sword. Without activating the martial intent within, he executed Mysterious 3000, counterattacking against that sword. Ling Han was afraid that the 2 swords would both be fully on if he activated the demon birth sword's martial intent, and then he would just be an adornment. Moreover, the demon birth sword might not be able to suppress this formation sword, and he'd be doomed if it were the other way around. As expected, as the demon birth sword didn't unleash its might, the formation sword still maintained the power of spiritual infant tier, but the sword light's destructive power was still terrifying. Ling Han reckoned that if all the students of the Restore Heaven Academy fought together, they would still be annihilated by this sword. Ling Han's battle prowess was fully unleashed, with the Eye of Truth and the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven all activated, and his physical strength was also unleashed to the extreme, his battle prowess exploding. It far surpassed the spiritual infant tier, and could even strike down peak stage deity transformation tier elites, but against this sword, it was just on par. No, to be correct, Ling Han was probably still at a slight disadvantage. After all, this sword suppressed its tier to fight him, and had an innate advantage. Ling Han refused to accept it. Moreover, the stronger this sword was, the more he wanted to obtain it. He wielded the demon birth sword with his right hand and slashed out a sword light, using the power of bone symbols along with it. Moving left and right to eliminate the power in the sword light, he continued to charge forth, and even if he was bombarded by a few sword lights, he was going to grab this sword with his hand. Without a tool spirit, he could put the sword inside the Black Tower, suppressing it would be easier this way. Chapter 720. To couple hardness with softness. Henye. It was easier said than done. When Ling Han was too close, the sword would unleash even stronger might, sweeping down a sky full of sword lights. It could be seen clearly that the sword light formed a formation, which increased the destructive power. It was difficult, very difficult to deal with. Ling Han seemed to be facing a hedgehog, and didn't know where to start. He would be terribly hurt no matter what. How could it be suppressed? Ling Han frowned. His physique sufficed, his recovery power sufficed, and he didn't fear being hurt by the sword light. But the problem was that he was inferior in power, and once he was too close, the formation sword shot out endless sword lights, which couldn't be dodged at all, forcibly pushing him backwards. It was just absolutely cheating. How could it be obtained? Ling Han used the Eye of Truth, which was useless. The sword light was interwoven so closely that there wasn't a shred of a crack, and even if he turned into a fly, he wouldn't be able to fly through. There was no solution. Completely unsolvable. How could it be done? Ling Han thought of countermeasures. First, he could unleash the Heaven Transformation Bowl to absorb it directly. However, this was inappropriate. Not to mention whether it was absorbable or not, even if it was, Heaven Transformation Bowl's function was to refine all things and extract their essence. After this formation sword was absorbed, Ling Han didn't know whether it could become a divine material, but the formation patterns on it would definitely be gone. The formation patterns were what he wanted. Then, how about trying the demonic pattern on his left hand? It came from the refinement of Azura Demon Emperor's demonic chi, which Small Tower said contained the power of laws, and its destructive power was extremely amazing. Up till now, Ling Han still hadn't tested out its limits. Perhaps it could eliminate the sword light. Let's test it out. He charged towards the formation sword again and extended his left hand. The black demonic pattern appeared and pressed towards the sword light. Pa! The sword light immediately shattered. It works! Ling Han exulted, marching straight in to collect this treasured sword, but the next moment, the sword emitted a terrifying killing intent and vein-like patterns lit up as it completely activated. *T. A fully resuscitated murderous sword is comparable to a shattering void tier elite. Now that was big trouble. Xiu, sword light was ablaze, charging towards Ling Han. It was a murderous sword of the shattering void tier. Ling Han immediately hid in the black tower. He was currently completely unqualified to challenge a shattering void tier elite, and the best strategy was to escape. The formation sword lost its target and soon dimmed down. Ling Han was extremely gloomy. The demonic patterns were also a part of him, so after he used the demonic patterns, why did the formation sword fully activate to the point of being so hostile? Unreasonable, so unreasonable. How could it be taken? Small Tower, what can you do? Ling Han said. Small Tower swayed, appearing before him, and said, with your current abilities, it's impossible to take that sword. The formation patterns on it are formed by this realm's laws, and though not very complete, it's already reached a very high level. I simply used the demonic pattern, so why did this sword fully activate? Ling Han said, puzzled. Because both are powers of law, so they'll activate each other, Small Tower answered, and then said disdainfully, they're all just the weakest powers of law that I can annihilate with a slight shake. This guy was being arrogant again. Ling Han shrugged and said, what use is your saying it? It can't help me retrieve this sword. Small Tower paused, as if hesitating, and after a while it said, it's not impossible. What's the method? Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. Taking its time, Small Tower said, you cultivate the indestructible Heaven Scroll, reaching the diamond tier, but you've now only grasped the power of extreme hardness. However, the real diamond body is not just stubbornly hard, but it couples hardness with softness. Couples hardness with softness. What do you mean? Ling Han asked. Hardness can't last long as it's easy to break. Simply seeking the extreme of hardness isn't the extreme of defense, Small Tower explained. You've now reached the peak of humanity in the hardness aspect, and it's about time to walk the soft side. How? Ling Han became interested in this topic, but he was in no hurry to ask how to resolve the formation sword's attacks. Didn't you absorb blood-sucking origin gold? Small Tower suddenly said. Blood-sucking origin gold is a typical example of coupling hardness with softness. It can be hard like metal and soft like fingers, and when bearing great force, it can even stretch out to offset great force and not break. Ling Han suddenly remembered and said, I once punched Jia Ming, but his neck stretched shockingly for 30 meters, dampening the power of the punch. Yes, that's coupling hardness with softness. You cultivate one side of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, reaching the diamond body. It's impossible for anyone to be harder than you in the same tier. However, you still haven't started on the soft side, so in terms of physique, you're not invincible at the same tier, Small Tower said. Then how can it be done? Ling Han asked. Small Tower said, people and all living beings are made up of countless particles, and the effect of any physical art is to increase the toughness of these particles. However, if you think from another angle, the combination of the particles isn't fixed, so why can't it be broken? Countless rocks form a great wall, but they can also form a tall tower. On the assumption of having the same number of rocks and that they don't shatter, there can be infinite transformations. How many particles are in a person's body? Countless. So, your transformation is also endless. That's the beauty of living beings, having countless possibilities, unlike treasured tools and puppets, which are fixed. Ling Han was instantly enlightened. Small Tower didn't impart him any mystic arts, yet pushed open a new door for him, allowing him to look in a completely new direction. So, the path can also go this way. Indestructible Heaven Scroll's Hardness. According to what Small Tower said, it should be the strongest in the world, reflected in the particles that made up the body. This was the strongest in the same tier. However, precisely because the body was made up of countless particles, the particles themselves can't be destroyed, but the makeup could be destroyed. What he needed to do now was to let the particles slide continuously when he received an attack. Similar to Jia Ming, taking his punch and stretching his neck for 30 meters to neutralize the power. Jia Ming could already control the particles in the body. This was the sign of softness. Neither hardness nor softness could be lacking. Without hardness, you would be flour paste no matter how soft you were and still break under slightly greater application of force. Without softness, no matter how hard the rare metal, it could still be refined, or else how were spirit tools made? Coupling hardness and softness would be like blood-sucking origin gold, killing people when hard, and wrapping around fingers when soft. He fell into deep thought and looked within himself with the eye of truth, exploring how to control the movement of the particles in his body. The indestructible Heaven Scroll had related records, but it was unclear. Before, he'd never understood them, but having been instructed and guided by Small Tower, this section of the scroll finally became logical, constantly enlightening him. He lost track of time and immersed himself in the new realization. Chapter 721. Changes according to will. In Ling Han's mind, he unceasingly comprehended new concepts, which made him unable to contain his joy. He was definitely an extremely intelligent person. Being able to become the Alchemy Emperor in his past life was a clear proof of this. Furthermore, this was without any predecessor's guidance. Yet, he'd still managed to accomplish such a feat in alchemy. Wasn't that amazing? Now, he had focused his intelligence on unraveling martial arts, and dedicated his entire being to reaching the pinnacle of martial arts. Overwhelming changes were happening within his body. All were to be both strong and flexible at the same time. He had both strength and gentleness. This matter might seem easy in theory, but to actually accomplish it was too difficult. Really too difficult. As everyone was used to their current state, it was difficult to break the habit. Further, to allow the body to stretch like the blood-sucking origin gold and possess such elasticity was a qualitative change. Breaking through your limits and reinventing yourself. Within his dantian, the small being that was Ling Han's spiritual infant was keeping watch, its expression serious as it formed multiple mysterious-looking signs. The indestructible Heaven Scroll had long since been branded upon it, and now the spiritual infant was currently unraveling a mysterious technique and harmonizing from within. It thereby boosted the change in Ling Han. It wasn't clear how much time had passed when Ling Han stretched out the index finger of his right hand. With his left hand, he grabbed his right index finger and yanked it hard. Previously, if he had pulled with his full strength as what he had done now, he would have definitely stretched out the whole of his right arm. Yet now, a strange thing had happened. His finger actually elongated and thinned, dispersing the force with which he pulled by half. However, once the index finger lengthened up to around 30 centimeters in length, it could no longer be stretched. This was the limit. Ling Han could not help but smile. He had succeeded. He had finally succeeded. Although he was still far from reaching the level of blood-sucking origin gold in changing form, this was still an improvement. This was a great progress. Again. Ling Han did not just stay sitting. He was constantly waving his arms and kicking with his feet. Everything was normal at first, but the distance his striking fists and kicking feet could reach was slowly increasing further and further. It was his body that was stretching. Ling Han's gaze lit up. This wasn't simply just dispersing force. Rather, this could give rise to the formation of a completely different battle tactics. Others might have thought that your fists could only reach so far to be able to shoot out origin power. Yet, in actual fact, the distance at which you could strike was dozens of times the distance. Naturally, it would be difficult for others to defend themselves against this skill. Moreover, if his fists and feet could be stretched endlessly, wouldn't he be able to turn any battle into one fought at close quarters?
One had to know that he had cultivated body arts, so his body was comparable to that of precious metal on a level higher than his own, and his brute strength was also quite terrifying. With the addition of these two factors, who could be able to fight on par with him in close quarters? However, Ling Han immediately discovered the limitations. Without the stimulus of external force, he was able to extend his body only up to a limited distance.
This was similar to a spring.
In theory, it could be pulled longer and longer, but this had to be caused by an external force. When the external force disappeared, it would be restored to its original state unless it was broken. The original state of Ling Han's body was the most stable. Therefore, no matter what changes his body had undergone, it would instinctively try to return to this state.
Too bad. Ling Han shook his head internally.
If he could control his body to change forms like the blood-sucking origin gold, then he could invent a completely different set of battle tactics, being able to stun anyone with a killing strike.
He shouldn't ask for too much. Ling Han smiled. Now, he had become slightly accomplished. He would go and battle that array sword again. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower. Fortunately, the array sword did not recover and try to kill him. Otherwise, he would have been doomed. Kume, Kume, Kume. Let's fight again. He laughed and took the initiative to rush over. Xiu Xiu Xiu. 7 flashes of light shot out from the sword and sliced towards him. Ling Han gave a humph as his body continued to move forward. He did not even use the demon fairy step anymore, allowing the 7 flashes of light to hit him. Now, he was going to use this sword to sharpen the soft side of the indestructible heaven scroll. Pu. In this way, the 7 flashes of light naturally sliced towards him head-on. The clothes on Ling Han's chest were torn open as the sword flashes slashed at him. Ling Han's chest actually stretched back visibly by 3 meters, 6 meters, even 15 meters. And at this time, the power of the 7 sword flashes was finally exhausted. Pang! Ling Han's chest bounced back. His face was slightly pale.
Practicing on his own was one thing, but to do it to such an extent on his first real attempt was something that made him feel it was slightly unbearable.
3 bones have been broken and internal organs have also sustained slight injury, he thought. After all, this was an attack from the array sword, which could sever even a deity transformation cultivator in half. Yet he had taken it head-on. How could it be possible that he wouldn't have to pay the slightest price for this? However, what made Ling Han happy was that this time he hadn't been forced to retreat even in the least bit. He had turned his body into countless combinations of particles. The impact of the sword flashes had all been directed to the upper body to be dispersed. Hence, the lower body naturally did not move. It could be done. He had a strong confidence that he would be able to conquer this treasured sword. Again. The indestructible heaven scroll circulated within his body. The body of diamond was claimed to be unbreakable. Even if it had received serious damage, it could automatically heal. It was only just a while. Yet his broken bones had already fused back together as if he had never been injured at all. He kept on attacking, but human power was limited, after all. After he had endured too many strikes of sword flashes, he couldn't help but fall back. Otherwise, he would really be cut into 2. The smile playing about the corner of Ling Han's lips was getting wider and wider. His understanding of softness was getting deeper and deeper. There was improvement with every strike sustained, and the injuries which he had to bear were also getting lighter and lighter. He had learnt to use his body's many particles to disperse the force which he had to sustain so much, so that he wasn't just pulling it vertically, but also being able to expand horizontally. Before, he had just turned himself into a spring. Now, it was a dough that could not only spread in one, but in every direction. Hence, when his chest was again struck by a sword flash, it was visible that his entire chest was expanding like the surface of water as it was paper, becoming incredibly thin. However, in this way, the attack which he had absorbed was reduced by at least 90%. At this time, the hard side had also exhibited its formidable power, trying to hurt his body with only 1/10 of the power. His body bounced back and returned to its original state. Ling Han's face was slightly pale. This time, he really wasn't injured. However, the previous state was not his normal form, so it had brought him much strain. The transformation could not be maintained for too long. Otherwise it would also collapse. Or so he thought, and immediately laughed in spite of himself. If he could stretch up endlessly, then wouldn't he be able to effortlessly absorb the attacks on the level of the Shattering Void tier? Human power was at times exhaustive. This was in line with the Tao of the world. He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the array sword, and smiled. I shall conquer you within 3 strikes. Xiu, as the thunderclap 9th heaven spread out, he moved to strike once again. Pang 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 pang. The sword flashes were as bright as if they were ablaze, and slashed towards him madly. Ling Han had no fear. Every part of his body was swelling to absorb the force behind the attack without his retreating even half a step. On the contrary, he had even stretched out his right hand and forcibly extended it for a distance of 1 meter. After absorbing 3 consecutive sword flashes, his hand had finally caught the hilt of the sword. Hong, a terrifying killing intent suddenly struck at Ling Han's consciousness. Chapter 722. Revere Life Sword. Henye. This sword existed for killing. The sword's blade had been engraved with array patterns, and they were all meant to kill, capable of cutting through the void. Now, the array patterns had transformed into sword intent, and penetrated Ling Han's consciousness. Wang, the spiritual infant, rose up and entered into his consciousness. It sat in the center and guided the sword intent. Wrapped by the indestructible heavenly scroll, it emitted a bright golden light, appearing dignified like the arrival of a great man versed in Tao. The killing intent was suddenly contained, and then began to dissipate like melting snow. The indestructible heaven scroll, the supreme existence. Indeed, the exhibition of only a small portion of it already allowed him to ascend the ranking that contained all the powerful prodigies from the last millennia. Even if this formation sword was incomparably terrifying and could cut through the void, upon coming up against the indestructible heaven scroll, it could do nothing. This was a battle between the different levels of divine sense, and had nothing to do with battle prowess. This was a qualitative confrontation. Would the indestructible heaven scroll be inferior in quality? That had got to be a joke. The killing intent had disintegrated. The formation sword no longer shone. It now looked no different from an ordinary sword. It was done. Ling Han couldn't help but burst out laughing. He had not only conquered a treasured sword, but had also made great progress in his body arts. The rewards this time were huge. He held the formation sword and examined it closely. He was extremely intrigued by the array patterns on the blade. But it was too complicated. He had only looked at it for a short while and felt his head was pounding, making wang sounds. It seemed as if his head was going to explode. He quickly averted his eyes and contemplated for a while, yet he couldn't help but feel shocked. This was because he had taken a good look at it for some time just moments ago, yet he unexpectedly couldn't recall even a single array pattern, as if there was a mysterious force at work that had erased it. Ling Han did not bother about it. He retrieved the sheath. However, in contrast, though the material of the sheath was of top quality, it completely couldn't be compared with the sword. The material of the formation sword was a rare metal of level 10, and the value of the array patterns engraved on the blade was more likely to have exceeded even level 10. The material used on the sheath was only of the 9th tier, which seemed extremely crude in comparison. It made sense though, since the scabbard was not meant to be used for battle anyway. To use a level 10 rare metal to forge the sheath would be extremely wasteful. Moreover, even if it was made with a metal at level 9, it would already make one feel it had soaring opulence. The #1 killing sword in the world? Ling Han saw 6 characters written on the sword. Would this be the name of the sword? It's again the #1 in the world. Isn't this a bit high profile? It doesn't match my character. He threw the sheath into the Black Tower. This stuff was useless. It would be better to melt it down and forge it into an arrow to better make use of its characteristics. You have such strong killing aura. Henceforth, you shall be called Revere Life Sword. Don't kill lightly. It is natural law that all living beings are to grow, so you can't arbitrarily deprive other creatures of their right to live. Ling Han laughed. He shook the sword gently, and martial intent surged within. Wang, a few array immediately patterns lit up. When he delivered a slash with the sword, 10 sword flashes suddenly appeared. Pu. The walls around him were instantly left with 10 shallow slash marks. It's so powerful. Ling Han was speechless. This stone chamber had withstood the battle between him and the Revere life sword without collapsing, which showed just how sturdy it was. However,
Now that there were already slash marks left behind after a single strike, this also proved the formidable strength of Revere Life Sword. He slashed once more with the sword. This time, sword ray swept out from the sword. Hong, a dent about 30 centimeters deep suddenly appeared on the wall. However, the amazing thing was that the wall actually began trembling, and the slash mark very quickly disappeared. Ling Han was shocked. This tool pavilion actually had self-recovery abilities. Hiss, this tool pavilion was a treasure in itself. Ling Han felt tempted. If he could also keep this tool pavilion, then wouldn't all the things inside be his? Just at this moment, the originally closed door suddenly opened. He had obtained the treasured sword, so there wasn't any reason to stay here. Ling Han stowed the Revere Life Sword into the Black Tower, side by side with the Demon Birth Sword. Both blades held midair in suspension. Yet, Demon Birth Sword actually lowered automatically slightly, not daring to be on the same level with the former, showing the dominance of the Revere Life Sword. Swords had spirits of their own, and would also compare with their peers. Ling Han stepped out of the stone chamber. The stairs were in front of him. He looked around and saw that there were several stone chambers on this floor, but each one had been sealed tightly. He tried to open them, but neither using fists nor a sword could break the doors and allow him to enter. Helpless, he could only take the stairs to go down to the next level. On the next floor, there were again several stone chambers and a flight of stairs. He didn't try to break through the doors, but headed straight down the stairs. Previously, he had been on the 5th floor, so he had to continue going down 4 flights of stairs before he finally returned to the ground floor. He stepped out and saw that there were still many people around, eager to try out the martial stone. Ling Han! Ling Han! Hunyeo jumped over and immediately dived straight into his arms. She hung onto his neck and said, "You've been away for so long. Niao missed you to death." Ling Han didn't know how long he had been cultivating inside the Black Tower, so he turned around to ask the approaching Xu Xian, "How long have I been inside?" 20 days, Xu Xian informed him. "Oh, so long." Ling Han only felt that he had just blinked his eyes, and it hadn't even been a day. How could it be that 20 days had passed? "Did you guys obtain anything?" he asked with a smile. Yes. Hunyeo immediately jumped out of his arms. Niao got something fun. She suddenly summoned an enormous pair of scissors that was slightly taller than even herself. It was entirely red in color, and when the scissors were closed together, they resembled a coiled dragon that was covered in scales. The pointed tip was a dragon's head, vivid and lifelike. "Go!" the little brat shouted, and the scissors immediately flew out. They actually transformed into a red dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws while emitting formidable divine might. "Oh, Dragon Fang shears! Lord Rabbit has seen this before in the notebook left behind by my ancestor," Rabbit said. According to legend, a true dragon died in this realm, and as the dragon's blood spread out, it spawned countless treasured medicine, while the dragon's bones turned into mountains and became what is known now as the Holy Land for the 5 great sections. Furthermore, some of them have become deadly zones of this realm, and hold great danger. The only thing that did not change was the dragon's fang. A long time ago, a great master of martial arts got a hold of this dragon fang and forged it into the dragon fang shears. When stimulated fully, it can possess the power of a real dragon's bite. Everyone was shocked. Such a treasure was actually obtained by Hunyeo. Incredible! Incredible! This treasure would arouse the interest of even shattering void-tier cultivators. Ling Han smiled. He had obtained the Revere Life Sword. Even if it was to come up against Xu Xiu Ran's ultimate saber, he would have the ability to counterattack. Furthermore, Hunyeo also had the Dragon Fang shears, so the abilities on their side had made great progress. Xu Xian, Wenren Qian, and Yuan Cheng he had also obtained their rewards. However, they had obtained only level 8 spirit tools, which was a far cry in comparison to Ling Han and Hunyeo. Sure enough, the results they achieved on the martial stone directly affected their rewards. With this, Xu Xiu Ran and Dong Linger, who had concealed their strength, would definitely die of depression. Rabbit had also obtained a treasure, but it adamantly refused to say what it was, which made everyone else curious. Ling Han did not see the Rain Emperor or Mu Rongqing. He asked Xu Xian and got to know that the two had actually been here, but they had already left. Now they each led a team and became the boss.
Their actions for the purpose of the overall plan had to be reconsidered. Ling Han. Jia Ming appeared, staring at Ling Han, his eyes emitting a bloody light. Chapter 723. Well done. Hey nye. Want to fight? Ling Han asked laughingly. He had now mastered the art of coupling toughness with gentleness where they complemented each other to create an ideal mix. He was completely fearless even if Jia Ming was a whole cultivation tier above him. Humph, it's not a fight, but my executing you. Jia Ming retorted with a prideful air. So what if the secret techniques mastered by Ling Han were superior to his? In the end, without attaining a certain cultivation level, and without attaining the level of major accomplishment in the secret techniques, he could still totally crush Ling Han. Then let's have a fight. Ling Han naturally was not afraid to fight. Handsome little brother, what are you fighting over? It was at this moment that a sweet and charming voice rang out. The terrifying aura struck unsuspectingly, making everyone feel as if there was a rock pressing down on their chests. It was so difficult to bear that it made one only wanted to spit out blood. The throngs of people couldn't help but part, and there, amidst the crowd, one could see a tall and slender yet well-filled-out figure of a beautiful lady. She sat upright with her legs laid out horizontally atop the body of a huge demonic lion. The demonic lion was so imposing and fiercely powerful that it was alarming. Its entire body was covered in scales, akin to those of a dragon's, and its presence was even more terrifying as if it could shake the stars and constellations off the skies with just a roar. In reality, it could indeed accomplish such a feat as it was an existence of the shattering void tier. The Lunar King had arrived. Who is this? With such overly terrifying presence. My heart is about to explode. Moreover, what an astonishing beauty. Look at that bosom. It is so voluptuous that I definitely would not be able to hold it in with one hand. Wouldn't it be great if I could just have a touch? Pah! Someone had cast lustful looks upon the Lunar King, and unwittingly spoke those lewd thoughts aloud. Immediately, his whole head exploded, leaving the headless body to rock and sway a few times before falling down with a loud crash, thoroughly dead. When the others saw this, they were all overwhelmed with shock, staring at the Lunar King with deep fear. That was because she had stretched out her long, slender and fair hand. Her finger pointed at that person, so evidently she was the one who had killed him. The problem here was not whether that person's strength was strong or not, but rather the majority of the people here all possessed very powerful backgrounds. Making such an unbridled attack, aren't you afraid that it would give cause to disaster? Only a handful of people knew that this particular mistress was in fact at the shattering void tier. There was no need for her to fear anyone in this realm. Furthermore, for him to have dared to have the audacity to utter such lecherous words to an elite of the shattering void tier, shouldn't he be killed? Even if he was a true disciple of the Heaven Sword sect or the Absolute Saber sect, he would have definitely died in vain. How could the shattering void tier tolerate such humiliation? The Lunar King approached riding on the demonic lion, and even Jia Ming, who was totally clueless about what it was like to be filled with respect and awe, took a few steps backward, unable to equal the Lunar King's aura. His future achievements were a different story, but at least at present, he totally could not compare with the Lunar King. I won't allow you to have any ideas on Hu Niu's Ling Han. Hu Niu waved the dragon fang shears as she roared at the Lunar King. The Lunar King could not help being dazed for an instant. You have actually obtained the dragon fang shears? What rarity! Wasn't it claimed to be unattainable? Even I was not able to obtain it those years ago. If I had wanted to obtain it, how could it be possible that I would fail? Her beautiful eyes swept across as she remarked, The lot of you have all used the stone of martial intent, I presume? Ha, just telling you, I had once left my name inscribed on that stone tablet, the 99th place in all the history of this realm. Ling Han's group were snickering secretly at present. This master's name had actually been already struck off from the list. The sudden emergence of three super geniuses, Ling Han, Hu Niu, and Jia Ming, all at the same time had immediately forced down the Lunar King's name. The Lunar King was still unaware of this, and looking upon the odd expressions on everyone's face, asked, You don't believe me? Kitten, lead the way, let them have a look at my name. The demonic lion was already made completely submissive, truly as if it was just a kitten. It carried the Lunar King to the front of the stone of martial intent. The Lunar King, apparently filled with pride,
pointed her finger at the stone of martial intent and said, "At that time, only I and His Majesty made it onto the list.
The other 7 kings all merely managed to trigger red light, and absolutely could not compare with me. Where did my name go?" She stared fixedly at the stone of martial intent. Where was her name on the 99th place? Even in the 100th place, she also did not see it. "After such a long time, this piece of lousy stone has malfunctioned?" she mumbled. "No, it has been forced down by others already." Ling Han opened his mouth. "At the very beginning, I did indeed see the Lunar King's name on the 99th place.
What? Who would dare to force down my name?"
The Lunar King became indignant at once, directing her line of vision to the list as she searched upwards. Very quickly, her gaze fell upon Jia Ming's name. Immediately, she snapped in a murderous manner. "Which fellow is named Jia Ming?" Shua, everyone's gazes settled unwaveringly upon Jia Ming at the same time. It was a conditioned reflex. Words from the mouth of an elite of the Shattering Void tier would draw out one's subconscious reactions and influence one's will. The expression on the Lunar King's face instantly turned dangerous as she cracked her fingers, making popping sounds. "So you're the guy. How dare you force down my name from the list? Tell me, should I chop you into 3 or 5 pieces?" The color drained from Jia Ming's face. No matter how capable he was, to challenge an elite of the Shattering Void tier was beyond his capabilities. Furthermore, that person had also made it into the list on the Stone of Martial Intent before. And now, she had even attained the battle prowess of the Shattering Void tier, which was deemed as nearly achieving the ultimate battle prowess that the Stone of Martial Intent predicted. How formidable was that? Even if all the prodigies of the Earth Dragon sect that had been sealed were to appear at the same time, even the strongest among them could not possibly match her. In a flash, the Lunar King's expression turned extremely dark as she questioned, "What you mean is that I am very old already?" "Senior. Senior, your sister." The Lunar King leaped down from the demonic lion's body and charged towards Jia Ming, beating him up fiercely. With her strength, she naturally overpowered Jia Ming and thrashed him heavily. Ling Han was laughing inwardly. The Lunar King was exceedingly sensitive about age, and even Ma Duo Bao, an emperor, was also beaten up. He actually dared to call her senior and even especially emphasized the age gap between the two. He had really run straight into the sharp end of her spear. Jia Ming felt very wronged, but he could not open his mouth to refute at all. He was beaten by the Lunar King till his nose was bloody and his face was swollen. He felt he has totally become a punching bag. His only fate was to be brutally abused. Only when the Lunar King was feeling somewhat appeased after beating him did he groan earnestly as he covered his face. "Senior, not only I have made it into the list, there's also Ling Han and that little girl." "Senior?" The Lunar King's rage, which had calmed down with much difficulty, surged forth once again. Which part of her looked like a senior to him? Hit again. Pong, pong, pong. After a heavy thrashing, the Lunar King smacked her hands and felt her mind and spirit had eased. She looked towards the Stone of Martial Intent and said, "Which places are the both of you at that you can also surpass me? Fuck." She had caught sight of Ling Han's and Hu Nio's names, and they were ranked at the 2nd and the 1st place, respectively. Jia Ming looked on and couldn't stop the corners of his mouth turning into a sneer. He ranked on the 51st place and was already beaten up so badly. Since the two of them ranked 1st and 2nd, could they still stay alive? "Ha ha ha ha, you actually made His Majesty, that egoistic maniac, drop into the 3rd place?" The Lunar King suddenly burst into hearty laughter after staring dazedly for a while. "I am about to laugh myself to death." That fatty claimed his battle prowess was unparalleled with such extreme pomposity that he even gave himself a title of first. Unexpectedly, he has actually been forced down to the 3rd place already. Wahahaha, I really want to go back and get a look at the expression on that fatty's face now. I will definitely make him lick my shoes. Well done. Chapter 724. A Shocking Glory. Henye, henye. At this moment, the anguish in Jia Ming's heart must have magnified to an immeasurable extent. They had all similarly made it into the list, and collectively forced the Lunar King down from it, so why was there such disparity in treatment? He was beaten up, yet Ling Han and Hu Nio were actually praised with a "well done." "Well done, your sister, it's so unfair." Yet Ling Han was dumbfounded as he remarked, "This first was actually that Fatima?"
The Lunar King nodded, then added, "Yes, it's precisely that fatty." But His Majesty was not a fatty before. On the contrary, he was an attractive and charming handsome man. If he had deigned to humbly court me, perhaps my heart would also be stirred.
Every fatty had good potential. Ling Han could not imagine how that fatty Ma, whose horizontal width was comparable to his vertical height, had looked like when he was as lean as a lightning bolt.
He also did not dare to imagine it, as Fatty Ma's looks were already ingrained into his mind no matter what. He could not relate him to being slim.
You lot sure are impressive, to have actually forced His Majesty down the rankings. Just so you know, that fatty's combat strength is truly fearsome. Even if we, the 8 kings, fight against him together, we would not be his match. A light glinted in the Lunar King's beautiful eyes. No wonder His Majesty has such high regard for you lot that even I also feel envious. That fatty Ma was actually the holder of the first place since the beginning of history.
From the current perspective, it was not wrong to say that. That was because he had indeed already attained perfection of the Shattering Void tier, and it was certain that he had also mastered the secret techniques he knew to the highest degree, far beyond what Ling Han and Hu Niu could compare with. After all, he had spent so many years on cultivating extensively.
Ling Han forced himself to stop pondering the fact that Fatty Ma also used to be lean. His heart was filled with great astonishment. The number one since ancient times. What kind of notion was this? Wrong, wrong. If Fatty Ma was so strong, then why had he sealed himself in the first place? Given his strength, he could already have split open the skies at that time. It was not like one's strength would advance with this seal. Even if sealed for 1,000,000 years, one's cultivation would still be how it was 1,000,000 years ago. And one would even age somewhat due to the change of time's flow. It was incomprehensible. Ling Han lowered his voice and said, "Lord, what connection do you all actually have with this ancient kingdom?" Didn't you know that this ancient kingdom was called Purple Moon Kingdom?" The Lunar King responded laughingly. Ling Han paused and blurted out, "You've all established this ancient kingdom?" "Of course. At that time, His Majesty led us, the 8 great kings, to unify the whole realm.
The so-called 5 great sects were all beaten into a pulp, and we even snatched clean all their amassed resources, leaving them with no means left to seal any elites, breaking off their inheritance with no way to pass it on."
The Lunar King guffawed while reminiscing as she continued. "But someone from their upper ranks actually managed to hold out. Then when we awoke, that previously defeated foe appeared so energetically again. How preposterous." Without inhibition, she did not lower her voice and was clearly heard by the people in the near vicinity immediately. And there was no one that wasn't flustered with shock at hearing it. So it turned out that this empire was so powerful that it once unified and ruled the whole realm. Even the 5 great sects suffered a crushing defeat, and they were making a comeback now.
No wonder their strength was horrifying. In just a few short months, they had already taken possession of nearly half of the lands in the Middle State.
The Lunar King pondered, then pointed out something.
"But during that time when we ruled over the realm, it had only been 3,000 years since the last reckoning, so there were not that many elites of the 5 great sects that had been sealed.
Now, it's a different matter. It has been almost 10,000 years, so their elites would have increased at least twofold. Moreover, we still have 4 kings who have yet to awaken, and that is why we are unable to destroy them all in one go." This was already alarming enough. Only 4 kings had awakened, yet they were already so ferocious. If all the 8 kings appeared together, it was indeed possible that they would once again conquer the whole realm. Furthermore, Ma Duobao himself had yet to make a move, and he was a real elite whose battle prowess had emerged superior over multiple generations. Ling Han mulled over it and asked, "Why did you all seal yourselves for so long?" "The time was not right." The Lunar King shook her head. "The natural environment was too poor at the time. Martial arts had yet to achieve the peak, and power of the nation had also not reached the highest degree, as such." She made a gesture that signified splitting open the skies. "Although His Majesty's battle prowess has been the strongest in history, but he still could not compete, so we had no choice but to seal ourselves, awaiting an appropriate time to arise." Now was indeed a good time. The martial arts environment was heating up again, and the overall ability level of the realm had reached the strongest level in these 10,000 years, and so, naturally, the stronger would be the power of nation that they could borrow. They would still have to possess strength. If they could not beat them with one shot, then they'd fight again after a nap. "Given what you said, this place is yours?" Ling Han asked. "Of course. Why else did you think I chased after that damn alchemy pavilion? The Lunar King humphed. That thing which has sprouted legs is an alchemy pavilion? The corners of Ling Han's mouth twitched momentarily. After all, it was his first time witnessing a building that sprouted legs and flew. It had practically gained a life of its own. That alchemy pavilion was forged from a divine metal. In fact, it is actually equivalent to an alchemy furnace. Furthermore, it has been nurtured endlessly by the precious chi of the earth that His Majesty has gathered. The longer the period of time, the stronger the effect, the Lunar King continued. But it was also because we overslept that divine metal has been nurtured for too long by the precious chi of the earth, which allowed it to gain sentience, and it couldn't even recognize myself or the Flame King. Ling Han probed. Then you all still did not succeed? No. The Lunar King was furious. The divine metal has practically gained a life of its own. Taking account of the time, it has been about 2 millennia at the very least. Being nourished by the precious chi of the earth day and night, this damned alchemy pavilion also became considerably impressive. From the looks of it, if His Majesty did not make a move personally, there would likely be no one in this world that could deal with it. Wasn't that putting Ma Duo Bao on too high a pedestal? But upon further thought, he was the #1 in battle prowess since ancient times, so there would never be too many compliments and praise that he deserved. Ling Han couldn't help being curious, and asked, what kind of alchemy art was that? He was the alchemy emperor, and naturally was very much interested in anything related to alchemy. Tai Ji star *******, the Lunar King answered. There was an immediate change in Ling Han's countenance as he said, that is a divine pill. High-level heaven-grade pills were considered divine pills. There were even some shattering void tier cultivators who were still unable to consume them, as their bodies would explode from the sheer strength of the pill. The Tai Ji star ****** was one of the highest quality alchemical pills among them all. It was capable of increasing the strength of one's divine sense. But exactly how strong, that Ling Han wouldn't know, because he was not at all familiar with the hierarchy of the immortal grades levels. That's right, it was part of our plans to consume it after successful concoction. But, unexpectedly, that damn alchemy pavilion actually dared to ignore me. The Lunar King was practically about to die from fury. Ling Han smilingly said, no need to rush, there's still a long time to go. Even if the 5 great sects were suppressed, opening up the skies was easier said than done. All the people had to submit willingly. If not, power of the nation would merely be akin to poison. Oh right. Since you've managed to enter the tool pavilion, what kind of precious tool did you get? The Lunar King casually asked. Ling Han took out the Revere life sword and answered, this tool here. The Lunar King inhaled sharply as she responded, the #1 killing sword has actually fallen into your hands? And yet, the fatty actually claimed that there was no one in this world apart from him who could obtain that sword. You're so lucky, kid. This precious tool was forged by His Majesty's own hands. Also, it is the only one, its mighty ability is unimaginable. Chapter 725. Fighting Jia Ming again. Hey nye. Ling Han couldn't restrain his mirth. Fatty Ma was really not being modest, proclaiming himself as #1, and even the sword he'd forged was also the #1 sword in this world. He weighed the sword in his hand and remarked, this sword is not bad. Of course this sword is not bad. It was no ordinary level 10 precious metal that was used to forge it. Instead, it was made with a small portion of divine metal as its foundation. Then on top of that, His Majesty added a hefty portion of level 10 precious metal, refined in every way possible, and finally shaped it into a tool, the Lunar King pointed out. Furthermore, His Majesty even engraved on the sword a short note. If it were not because I don't wield a sword, I would certainly snatch it back. Ling Han asked curiously, then, what kind of array do the array patterns engraved on it form? Haha, I leave it for you to ask that fatty Ma about it yourself. The Lunar King spread out her hands, not willing to clarify it. Ling Han mused to himself, Fatty Ma ought to be a master of array arts, and with his skill in array arts as support, his battle prowess could suppress the prodigies of all time, and be grandly placed as the first place. Just what kind of heights has he actually achieved on the array arts that he was powerful to such extent? Since the Tai Ji star ***** could not be recovered, I have also lost interest in this place, the Lunar King continued. I am not in the mood to waste time, as I have to locate the other 4 kings as soon as possible. When the moment comes, the 8 kings will unite. I feel excited just thinking about it.
Let's go. She mounted the demonic lion and rode off without a second thought.
Such a huge treasure, yet she actually appeared not overly concerned with it. She was truly nonchalant. It also further showed that she had strong enough confidence. She couldn't care less about what others referred to as treasures.
Young man, this is for you.
The Lunar King tossed something over. Ling Han caught it and saw that it was a crystal rock. He extended his divine sense inside, and instantly, a 3-dimensional map appeared in his mind. Every nook and corner, any place, could be infinitely magnified to display even the most minute of details. Hey, this was a map of this mystery realm. Ling Han recognized it immediately.
At the beginning, there was a wide plain, then it was the sea area, followed by plains again and desert. It was utterly identical to the places he had passed through before.
There were also signs marked on the map, which indicated that the region up ahead was the Beast Garden. He already knew that this current region was the Tool region. It had originally been a massive land of flames. But in the wake of the decline of the Purple Moon Kingdom, the flames had burnt up everything, turning the land into a desert. There onwards, it was the Herb Garden, where a lot of spiritual herbs grew, and situated at the rear of the Herb Garden was the Imperial Palace of the Purple Moon Kingdom. Inside it, there was a place called the Langya Library, and there lay hidden a lot of secret techniques that had been gathered by the Purple Moon Kingdom all those years ago. The Lunar King even specifically marked a line of words, Earth Overturning Seal. It was a mystical power. Ling Han couldn't help but be moved. He had already mastered 3 mystical powers, and was profoundly aware of the power that a mystical power held. Naturally, he would not mind learning another mystical power. Although it was said that one should not bite off more than one could chew, there was also a saying that declared an abundance of abilities would not weigh one down. If it was unsuited for him, then he would merely not need to spend too much time and energy to study it. Ling Han withdrew his divine sense and uttered, "We should also go." He wanted to take a look at the herb garden to see how flourishing this herb garden was after at least 2 millennia. "You think you can still leave?" Jia Ming humphed, his eyes sweeping across with an unfathomable and frosty gaze, not bothering to hide the killing intent in their depth. Ling Han gave out a slight "oh" and said with a laugh, "I have actually forgotten about you, pardon me, pardon me. To be honest, with your current appearance, I truly could not recognize you." "Filthy mouth." Jia Ming's gaze riveted upon him as he declared, "Do you dare to fight me?" "Tisk. TSK. TSK. A deity transformation tier cultivator is asking me whether I dare to fight him. You have the gall to even mention it?" Ling Han laughingly countered. Jia Ming humphed coldly nevertheless, then responded, "You and I are of somewhat similar age. Your level is inferior to mine because you are too useless, so whom could you blame?" Ling Han let out a snicker. Indeed, a fight of the same age or perhaps a fight of the same level could all be considered to be fair. Just that with age such as theirs, such geniuses indeed could not afford a 1 to 2 years gap. For example, Ling Han already had the confidence that he would advance to the deity transformation tier before the age of 20. By the time he was at Jia Ming's age, who knew, maybe he would already be in the heaven tier. Absolute fairness did not exist in this world. "It appears that you would not give up if I do not fight you. Then let's fight." Ling Han entered the bleak and boundless desert, turned around, and directed his gaze at Jia Ming. The latter had left the Tool Pavilion much earlier on, and had been lying in wait for him all this while. Naturally, this was conveying a kind of determination. "I would not give up until I crushed him." Jia Ming sneered as he took out 2 curved blades that were shaped like the crescent moon. The blades were very short, and as he held them in his hands, it looked like his fists had grown pointed horns. While they did not hinder his punches, they also rendered destructive power. Was this the spirit tool he had gotten from the Tool Pavilion? He similarly was ranked on the ranking, though not as astounding as Ling Han and Hu Niu, but the treasure he got was certainly also not ordinary. Ling Han did not wield the Revere life sword, for he wanted to test out the strength of his defense skills after he had cultivated the art of coupling toughness and softness against the battle prowess that was near to the limits of the deity transformation tier to see what kind of manifestation it would bring about. "Merely a spiritual infant tier cultivator, and you dare to challenge me." Jia Ming charged forth in large strides, striking out with a fist. His martial intent was shining brightly, leaving behind a band of light behind his fist. Ling Han drew up both his fists, wrapped with his origin power, and launched himself into an exchange of blows with his opponent. Both have cultivated body arts, and naturally were also more inclined to fight at close range. In terms of body arts, Ming was considered to be quite accomplished, and his physique's endurance was as tough as precious metal of the same level. Furthermore, his level was in fact originally higher than Ling Han's by a whole cultivation tier. Therefore, with regards to the level of physique strength, both parties were similar. But what about the soft aspect? Amid the exchange of punches, their arms have transformed into wave-like lines, which were unceasingly surging. If these were to graze the body of any ordinary person, the strong vibration would have definitely shattered their bones. However, these two still remained in fine condition, making use of such wave motions to continuously disperse the power behind every blow they were struck with. Ming was surprised that Ling Han had also grasped the art of coupling strength with gentleness. Previously, when they had been exchanging blows, Ling Han had merely displayed the aspect of strength. His physique had upped another level, and in addition to the art of coupling strength with gentleness, he was confident he could suppress Ling Han. What he did not anticipate was that Ling Han's level had also elevated, and had grasped the soft aspect, making both parties' defense level revert back to being of the same level once again. Since the defense was of fairly equal standing, the deciding factor would be the strength of their attacks. Ming grinned, then gave off a laugh, revealing a ruthless demeanor as the weapon in his hand suddenly emitted a coldness akin to that of ice and frost, bringing with it terrifying energy that slashed straight towards Ling Han. Ling Han firmly withstood this strike, but suddenly there was a spurt of blood, and a scar was left behind on his elbow. He couldn't help glancing at that weapon and noted that it should be a spirit tool of an extremely high grade. Although Ming was unable to display its full strength, it had still dealt damage to his physique. After all, his opponent's strength was of a much higher level than his, and with the activation of his spirit tool, he was naturally inflicted with an injury. However, the power of the indestructible Heaven Scroll was not merely reflected by the sturdy aspect of the physique, but also its ability to recover. Clearly visible to the naked eye, Ling Han's injury disappeared in the blink of an eye. If it weren't for the fact that Ming had stared fixedly at his wound all the while, perhaps he would not have even realized he had injured Ling Han earlier on. Such ability to recover could only cause Ming's expression to change drastically. Chapter 726. Bloodline of the Earth Dragon. Henye. A smile broke out on Ling Han's face as he gloated. So it appears that this time, there would only be grievance for you. He inadvertently revealed killing intent in his gaze being provoked by Ming time and again. He'd lost his patience. So long as he was able to kill him, he absolutely would not be merciful. Ming humphed, knowing that merely depending on the difference in cultivation tiers would not be enough to suppress and crush Ling Han. He gave out a low howl, and a weird sound escaped from his throat, while blue veins were throbbing throughout his body. It was as if there was some kind of terrifying thing trying to break out from within his body. Ling Han dared not underestimate the battle prowess of his opponent, as he had gained the approval of the Stone of Martial Intent, prevailing over thousands of prodigies through the ages to rank 51st. Although this was not the peak of Ming's current battle prowess, still, he could not be careless. Underestimating whichever of the prodigies could very likely plant the roots of destruction for oneself. 4 styles of Devil's Serpent. Ming bellowed, aiming at Ling Han as he went straight for the kill. A fist struck out directly to attack Ling Han's lower abdomen. Ling Han raised his hand to block it and bang. He struck his palm down on his opponent's wrist, but the latter seemed to have turned into dough. It actually took a turn and wound around to strike again at Ling Han's chest as the sharp blade in his hand shone with a cold light. Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that this guy's bones were actually soft? How could he change the form of his arm in such a way? This was not merely just grasping the soft aspect, but was instead some kind of secret technique. It was as if he was a serpent. Yes, precisely like the bones of a serpent. Ling Han's body bent backward abruptly, dodging the swing of the curved blade. Such movements were practically impossible for an ordinary cultivator to execute. Only by cultivating the body could the body then display such swift reactions. Moreover, Ling Han looked even more like he had been chopped in half by a knife. The extent of the bend in the upper half of his body was so much that it was inconceivable. Ming once again swung his fist over,
This time, his arm actually transformed into a big serpent, with its head moving towards Ling Han while opening up its mouth to bite. The black-colored snake's head was quite lifelike, its poisonous fangs clearly visible. This strike was really too fast. It was so fast that Ling Han could not evade it in time. Pop! This punch immediately pierced through Ling Han.
In.
Jia Ming frowned, for he had not managed to hit Ling Han with this strike. Ling Han had transformed into a lightning bolt, and had, in a flash, fled 3 meters away. He transformed back into himself again and laughingly remarked, "Almost hit me. Not bad, this move is not bad. One move covering another, really does show some skill." He had already cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven to the point of minor accomplishment, so his speed was of course rapid. How could it merely be some skill? It is more than enough to kill you. Jia Ming increased his battle prowess and charged towards Ling Han. He really was overbearing, this genius of Earth Dragon sect. Leaving his name on the stone of martial intent, he himself was a whole cultivation tier higher than Ling Han, holding the upper hand whether it was in the aspect of physical strength or battle prowess. If not for Ling Han having a great recovery ability, in addition to the thunderclap 9th heaven allowing him to evade and dodge out of harm's way, he would have been hit badly and dealt severe injuries by his opponent for sure. Even so, Ling Han also became more and more passive. He could only return 1 to 2 moves for every 10 moves his opponent made.
Today is the day that you die.
Jia Ming cried out. He wanted to kill Ling Han in a single blow. Your words sound nicer than any song, Ling Han remarked calmly. He was only testing the kind of defense level his own physique could currently reach. Accordingly, his battle prowess at the moment did not reflect its full capacity. These words, I will engrave them on your tombstone to let everyone know that there was such an arrogant idiot who was too stubborn to admit defeat even at death's door. Jia Ming guffawed, the light reflecting off his curved blade. Chill asterisk asterisk. This was very fearsome, for it could pose an enormous threat to Ling Han's defense. After all, it was a high-level spirit tool, and with Jia Ming's more powerful physical strength, he could even rip through level 8 precious metal. Ling Han was no longer being passive and getting thrashed. He drew out the Revere life sword, then raised and brought it level, pointing at Jia Ming, and retaliated.
Take a look at my sword that will slay you.
Jia Ming looked at this sword, and his expression couldn't help but change as he unwittingly blurted out, Array patterns. It was obviously a sword, yet it was unexpectedly covered with array patterns. Strange, too Strangite was way beyond his imagination. To be able to die by this sword, you can die with no regrets. Ling Han held the sword and struck out in a move to kill. Earlier, without the sword in hand, he could not fully display the might of Sword Ray, but now it was different. The Revere life sword itself contained some divine metal. Additionally, there was the fierce energy formed by the array patterns. Thus, the destructive power of Sword Ray delivered by this sword would naturally be even higher. Shua, Sword Ray swept out, seemingly able to destroy the heavens and wipe out the lands, extremely horrifying in its appearance. Hang, I am in the deity transformation tier, do you think I will fear you? Jia Ming humphed icily, swinging out his fist, transforming Ray into chi that formed huge black serpents that pounced towards Ling Han to bite him. Pop, pop, pop. The array patterns on the Revere life sword shone. There were merely 7 lights, but even so, it was still incredibly terrifying, mincing those big serpents into shreds. Jia Ming's expression turned ghastly pale. He knew that this sword was very impressive, but had not expected that it could reach such an extent. The destructive power could only be described as horrifying. How could there be such a precious tool? It was not as simple as Ling Han wielding an exceptionally outstanding tool had also activated an array that was a killing array with no compare, so how was one supposed to break it? Jia Ming cried out, eventually unleashing his ultimate great move. The empty shadow of the big serpent behind him disappeared, and became a genuine earth dragon. This kind of move made him terribly agonized. Bluish-green blood vessels were all over his face, and it looked like they were going to burst. After he howled loudly, the empty shadow of the earth dragon behind him finally stabilized, giving off a primal aura of an ancient era. At the beginning of the world, an earth dragon one came through the crack between the heaven and the earth. It was ancient and mysterious. The earth dragon held its head high. It did not have facial features, only a mouth, and its whole body was a dull red in color. Its limbs could be clearly seen as if it was still capable of dripping with sticky body fluids. giving one an incredible feeling of disgust. As soon as Jia Ming pointed at Ling Han, that earth dragon immediately pounced over in Ling Han's direction. The speed was very fast. It was not a physical existence, and could not be judged with common sense. In an instant, it had appeared in front of Ling Han, and ferociously bit down. Yet, because it was not a realistic entity, it was naturally also impossible for it to cause any substantial injury. The whole body looked just like a shadow gliding across. Jia Ming actually bellowed out a hearty laugh as he shouted, "Ling Han, you are already a dead man." His complexion was slightly pallid. Nevertheless, he was wearing a carefree smile. This was actually his real trump card, which involved the power of his bloodline. Because his ancestral blood was not extremely thick, using such a great move was very straining on him, and there would even be a certain amount of backlash to face later. But that was all right, for although this earth dragon was an empty shadow and could not possibly do any harm to a realistic entity, the fact was it was specifically aimed to harm the soul. Ling Han's soul should have been swallowed even if not entirely gone. There would merely be traces left behind. How much actual strength would he still have left to fight with? He took off with a blood-curdling cry in Ling Han's direction, aiming to finish him off. This time, he wanted to thoroughly kill Ling Han. Under the burst of brute force, he was like a raging arrow charging forth, materializing in front of Ling Han in a flash. The curved blade in his hand slashed forth towards Ling Han's neck. The strength of his physique was cultivated with his cultivation technique, but he needed to consciously control his soft aspect. Was Ling Han still capable of that with the state he was in now? A sneer hung at the corners of Jia Ming's lips. Finally, he could eliminate this great threat to himself. Chapter 727. Interference. Henye. A fist struck out. The array patterns on the curved blade shone, emitting a thick chill in the air. A ruthless smile appeared at the corners of Jia Ming's mouth, for with this one blow, this opponent who had the strongest battle prowess of all ages was going to be something of the past entirely. This gave him absolute joy. Xu Xian and the others in her group cried out in alarm. What was wrong with Ling Han? Xiu, it was at this moment that Ling Han's figure suddenly bent and miraculously dodged this fatal blow. How was that possible? The smile on Jia Ming's face immediately froze, but without waiting for him to recover from his shock, a fearful coldness whirled across, slashing at his chest. He had not expected Ling Han to still be able to react at all. Moreover, he had just pulled off a great move a moment ago, so his condition had already fallen to an all-time low. It was basically impossible to evade this sword. Pooh! At once, the sword hit the middle of his chest squarely, and his whole body was sent flying by the slash as a fountain of blood spurted from his chest. How is it possible that your soul is still intact? Jia Ming covered his chest. This incomprehension was beyond the injuries he had suffered. He would die with regrets if he did not get a clear understanding of the situation. Ling Han smiled slightly and remarked, "Why should I tell you?" Previously, during the time when the Earth Dragon had sprung a surprise attack on him, he indeed had been affected. But with a slight tremor of the Black Tower, that discomfort had been dispersed. He simply remained unperturbed and laid out a trap for his opponent. Jia Ming was so indignant he wanted to kill something. That was his ultimate move, and it was precisely with this move that he could dash up to the 51st place on the Stone of Martial Intent. That it was actually ineffective on Ling Han. This was driving him nuts. Could it be that this was the difference between the first and the 51st place? Wah! He suddenly threw up blood. Firstly, it was because of the surging rage in his heart, while secondly, the injury he had sustained on his chest was really too severe. The killing aura has transformed into countless small swords, roving and shifting within his body, making him feel such agony that he wanted to die. There were even tears of blood flowing out from his eyes. He burned with hatred. Had it not been for his being overconfident in his own ultimate move, he absolutely would not have been so easily harmed by Ling Han. In terms of real strength, he was in no way weaker than Ling Han after all. He was also an ultimate genius, and furthermore, he had the advantage of being a whole cultivation tier higher. Now being totally defeated in the eye of the public, moreover defeated by one of an inferior cultivation level, how could he bear such humiliation? Ling Han shook his sword, and once again charged forth to kill. He wanted to thoroughly eliminate this man.
Jia Ming hurriedly retreated as he did not want to die by Ling Han's hands. As long as his injuries recovered, there was still a chance for him to stage a comeback. He was definitely not weaker than Ling Han. But he had suffered a physical injury, and merely moving made his wound spurt out blood madly, which almost caused him to stumble and fall. His complexion also became ashen. Ling Han had arrived, unleashing a strike aimed at Jia Ming's neck, wanting to end this fight in a clear-cut and orderly manner. Jia Ming's hatred burst forth into flames of fury in his eyes. He had been so conceited that there was not any kind of life-saving precious treasure on him. On the one hand, he'd thought that there was none in this world that could or dared to kill him, and on the other, he believed that he would become dependent on such a treasure should it come into his possession, and would be held back from realizing his full potential. But now, he felt extreme regret. He didn't want to die. He wanted to live. Only if he stayed alive could he take revenge, and only by being alive could he surpass Ling Han. The sword slashed down. Pa! A withered and lean hand suddenly stretched out, 2 fingers pressed together firmly clamping the cutting blade of the sword in between, not letting the sword slash down even a tiny bit. An old man in a black-colored robe suddenly appeared. He was of great height and sturdy build, and as if he contained a volcano within his body, it looked like he could erupt at any time to burn the skies and wipe out the lands. He looked towards Ling Han and was all smiles as he said, "Young man, striking so ruthlessly, surely your heart must harbor sinister and vicious intentions." Ling Han lifted the blade of the sword. That old man also did not dare to go against such a killing sword forcefully. He withdrew his hand and retreated backward, while at the same time lifting Jia Ming up with a single move. "Respected Master Tong." Jia Ming revealed an expression of pleasant surprise. This was really an unexpected rescue from danger. Even for one with his disposition, he could not help but forget himself. This old man's surname was Tong, and the given name was Yang Wen. He was an elite of the Earth Dragon sect, and his cultivation level was in the heaven tier. Tong Yongwen smiled and actually said respectfully, Hereafter, you must always remember to put on the treasured talisman that the sect leader has bestowed upon you. Don't be presumptuous anymore. An act of carelessness could cause your downfall." "Yes." Jia Ming hastily nodded. His life was just saved by him, so no matter how wild Jia Ming was, he would also not dare to act arrogant at such a time. Tong Yongwen directed his line of vision towards Ling Han as his expression immediately became dark. To lash out without the least hesitation at a fellow disciple of the same academy, the moral character and disposition of yours really cause one's teeth to tremble. However, the academy's core values are precisely to cure sickness and save lives. I shall then first cure you of your haughtiness, and let you have a little taste of what hardship is like. He struck out and origin power gathered and transformed into a huge black hand, which was akin to have blotted out the sky and covered the earth, batting downwards over in Ling Han's direction. It was really sickening, obviously wanted to settle a personal score, yet actually uttered such pretentious words. Ling Han's body transformed into a lightning bolt and retreated backward in the nick of time as he said with indifference, "Old fool, do you still want face? This was originally a duel, and since we have already agreed to fight, one should be responsible for one's life and death. Before this, during the time when I ran into danger, why did I not see you jump out and come running to my aid? Want to be asterisk? Then don't think of setting up some kind of plaque to proclaim how chaste you are. It's so sickening." Tong Yongwen was so enraged that his body was trembling. This puny spiritual infant tier cultivator actually went so far to treat him with such insolence? He was at the peak of the heaven tier, and was only a step away from breaking through to the shattering void tier. No matter where he went, he should receive merely worship and reverence. But now, to actually be condemned by a torrent of verbal abuse in his face. This made him so overwhelmed with ire and wrath that he was almost driven mad. "Lad, you actually dare hurl insults at me," he reprimanded, his eyes burning with killing intent. He did not kill Ling Han, because he treasured ability. As a slave, Ling Han was not too bad, and he could someday deliver him to the immortal realm. Then, after being brainwashed, he would be turned into a qualified lackey. Yet, Ling Han actually dared to curse him so mercilessly, so his killing intent was naturally incited. He was but a slave, so what if he died? So be it. It did not matter how excellent natural talent was. He could just use 10 other lackeys to compensate for the gap left behind. All right? Ling Han smiled faintly and responded, "Dirty old swine, why could you not be cursed at?" I am a heaven-grade alchemist, and my position is of the same rank as yours, so you tell me why I could not curse you?
Tong Yongwen gave a scornful laugh. If it were a few hundred years ago, then indeed he would not want to offend a heaven-grade alchemist, for that would jeopardize the relationship with the Alchemist Association and affect the martial arts of the whole realm.
But now,
concoction of the realm pill was near at hand, and now that there was no use left for them, what was the use of an alchemist? At most, they needed only bring a few gifted talents of above-average standard into the immortal realm, then train and develop them. Nevertheless, they would still become lackeys. Just a lowly servant, what right did he have to behave so arrogantly?
Then you are really courting your own demise. Tong Yongwen's killing aura was ablaze. Injuring fellow disciples and cursing at your seniors, such dishonorable conduct has to be punished. I, on behalf of the Restore Heaven Academy, shall mete out the punishment. To pull the weight of your seniority, there is no lack of words to do so. Old dog, you have let me behold shamelessness at an all-new high. I am deeply impressed. Ling Han mocked with a short laugh. Damn you!
Tong Yongwen eventually could not hold it in anymore, and once again a palm struck forth. This time, his killing intent had been stirred, and the big hand that he swung out in a patting movement was much more fearsome than before. One by one, the patterns lit up, and the imposing aura of the heaven tier pressed down heavily. Just the air alone was enough to send an ordinary spiritual infant tier cultivator collapsing into pieces. Ling Han's figure hastily dodged and arrived by Xu Xian Er's side, where he then stretched out his arms and lifted her into his arms as he simultaneously called out, "Hu Niu Rabbit, let's go!" Fighting head-on against a heaven tier elite? Only an idiot would do such a thing. Chapter 728. Break Free. Hey.
Ling Han grabbed hold of Xu Xian Er, not bothering with the others. Although Yuan Chang He and Li Feng Yu were his underlings, both were also disciples of the Restore Heaven Academy. Tong Yongwen would not be frenzied to the point of doing something stupid like laying his hands on them. As for Hu Niu and Rabbit, their speed was not inferior to his, so there was no need for him to carry them along. Most importantly, the lesser the burden, the faster Ling Han's speed would also be. After he developed a body of lightning, it really did manage to elevate his speed to unimaginable heights, but it could only be considered barely comparable with the heaven tiers. Thus, if he wanted to bring along more people and yet still be capable of fleeing from a heaven tier elite, that would really be crazy.
Want to flee?
Tong Yongwen sneered, stepping forth in one big stride, maneuvering that colossal palm in a swift attempt to grab them. He was fast, but Ling Han was not slow, either. With the activation of the demon fairy steps, his figure was akin to that of a ghost. At the same time, he brandished his sword in a backward slash. Sword ray appeared in a blaze, and with the addition of the might of the Revere life sword, this strike was a blatant display of his abilities. Even Tong Yongwen dared not let the strike hit him, so he had no choice but to give his right hand a shake to set off a stream of energy to dissolve the threat that this strike presented to him. Ling Han seized the opportunity to flee far into the distance, with Xu Xian Er naturally hanging upon his back, without the need for Ling Han to expend energy to hold on to her. He drew forth the setting sun bow, gathered his origin power into an arrow, and Xiu, multiple ******* 1. Although he did not draw an actual arrow, the layering of the three mystical powers together was still absolutely astonishing. Tong Yongwen had no other choice but to repeatedly wave both hands to swat aside the arrows of origin power which caught him by surprise, making him bellow loudly in fury. Damn it. His skill completely suppressed Ling Han, yet he was actually being inflicted with a series of clever maneuvers deployed by the other, and could only gaze on helplessly at the other's receding figure. In the end, he was completely livid, all the blood in his body boiling, to the point he was no longer concerned with Ling Han's attack. He transformed into the likes of a raging arrow and pursued after Ling Han. Xiu, the arrow of origin power hit his body, yet could only pierce through his clothing and reveal the bulging muscles. It seemed as if his body was forged from precious metal. In the Earth Dragon sect, everyone cultivated body arts. Tong Yongwen's natural talent definitely was not as good as Jia Ming's, yet to be able to advance to the heaven tier, he also could not possibly be any ordinary person, either. Furthermore, the higher his cultivation level, the higher naturally would be the cultivation level of his body arts, using his higher cultivation level to compensate for the gap in quality. He went against the exterminating dragon star arrow, and charged in Ling Han's direction. Heaven tier was really so troublesome.
Ling Han sight.
For a spiritual infant tier cultivator to be able to manage this much, it was already considered a miracle.
He had no choice but to put forth a real arrow, and after drawing out his full strength, shot it in the direction of his opponent.
The destructive power of this strike was too strong.
Even Tong Yongwen dared not counter it head-on, and could only wave forth his palm in a strike to bat away the arrow.
Yet it was precisely because of this short span of time that Ling Han once again took the advantage to flee far away, greatly widening the distance between them. Shameless old wretch, wait till I advance to the deity transformation tier, I will definitely chop off your dog's head. With these words, Ling Han turned around and hastily fled away with his full speed. Hu Niu also made a face at him and said, "Old wretch, next time Niu will come again to beat you." Rabbit wore an expression of innocent sight obviously did not do anything, so why did it have to follow in their wake and escape as well? Why do I have to flee together with the lot of you? I feel so wronged. It spoke out in thorough discontentment. You have pilfered so many spiritual herbs that being wronged once or twice in a while is also considered nothing short of appropriate and fair. Ling Han roared with hearty laughter, yet even stronger wind was being tossed out under his steps as he ran even faster. Tong Yongwen again gave chase, but because he had fallen behind too much, after pursuing for a few steps, he had already lost track of Ling Han and could only come to a stop, feeling vexed. After running for quite a long time, Ling Han slowed down his pace. From the map, they were already fast approaching the herb garden. Rabbit, the herb garden is but up ahead, so how about it, don't you feel tempted? Ling Han laughingly said. Rabbit swallowed its saliva, but still spoke out obstinately. Do you think that I have not seen the world and will lose control of myself over just a few carrots? Gold-seeking rat also crawled out from Ling Han's front, with its big eyes full of anticipation. Spiritual herbs and what-not, they were its favorite. Niu also wants. Hu Niu also joined in on the fun. Ling Han was in a cold sweat. There were 4 people at his side, and 3 were actually gluttons. They took another step forward and the barren desert finally disappeared as lush and verdant forest and grassland emerged ahead. They also caught sight of a dilapidated courtyard wall. Evidently, this place had been subjected to grave damage. Is this still a herb garden? Ling Han muttered. Although spiritual herbs were nurtured by nature, nourished to the extreme, the requirements with regards to their growth conditions were also very stringent. As such, this herb garden had been divided into countless regions and every region had its own specific array, altering the environment to suit the growth of every kind of spiritual herbs. But the damage this place had suffered was too severe. Most of the arrays had been destroyed, which naturally brought a fatal disaster to the spiritual herbs that were originally growing here. As far as the eye could see, there were only ordinary trees and plants remaining here. Perhaps there might still be some spiritual herbs here, but to seek them out was absolutely not a matter that could be done in a short while. Rabbit, now is the time for you to shine, Ling Han said. Pay, I am not a dog to have such good sense of smell. Rabbit instantly retorted. Quickly look for it. Hu Niu fiercely ordered while staring fixedly at Rabbit, and continued in a harsh tone, else I will eat you. Rabbit feared no one, but became alarmed at Hu Niu's words, and proceeded to sniff in earnest at once, leading the group in search of spiritual herbs. However, this place was too wide, and even if Rabbit really had a nose like a dog, it also would not be able to sniff out and locate the spiritual herbs right away. They ceaselessly wandered and loitered all over the surrounding areas, while Rabbit also continuously shook its head, saying that it could not trace the scent of spiritual herbs anywhere. 3 days passed, yet they were still unfruitful, so they decided to depart and proceed towards the Langya Library first. After changing their course, they journeyed on. Less than half a day later, they came across a multitude of imperial palaces, which ought to have been incomparably magnificent, yet were now actually almost completely damaged. In addition, no matter how far the distance, one could also make out that there were signs of them being haunted by demonic beasts. They advanced in the direction of the imperial capital, moving with extreme caution. The demonic beasts that roamed around this place were not to be taken lightly. Furthermore, there were other powerful cultivators also scouting this place. They absolutely could not afford to be careless. Those in search of treasures at such a historical site would not bother with any courtesy whatsoever. Given the opportunity, they would attempt to kill the others in an attempt to obtain treasures themselves. Without doubt, the most important would still be to avoid the demonic beasts.
There were a few auras that were extraordinarily powerful and had reached the level of the heaven tier.
They were creatures that Ling Han was currently incapable of fighting against.
The library is in that direction.
Ling Han possessed the map given by the Lunar King. After considering the direction, he took the lead and set out.
The area was huge where the multitude of imperial palaces were at, yet no matter how big, it was also only to a certain extent. Very quickly, 3 people, a rabbit, and a rat came upon the front of a pavilion which had remained in good condition.
The pavilion had only 3 floors, and was also not very big.
In fact, it was looking especially small in such a place with so many imperial palaces, but this was actually the only structure that had not suffered any damage. Not even a shred, causing one to wonder. It was precisely because of such peculiarity that this place attracted many, and they practically filled this place to the brim.
Ling Han looked at the pavilion, directing his gaze upwards. There, a plaque was hung, with the words Langya Library written on it. Chapter 729. Langya Library.
Henye.
Were we too late? Ling Han's gaze swept across the place. There were at least over 100 people here. Furthermore, those were only the ones standing outside the pavilion who knew how many more were inside. Ling Han pulled a person away and asked, "Old chap, may I ask what is going on here?"
Luck seemed to be on his side as he happened upon someone who liked to brag about his knowledge, and proceeded to explain to him right away in an endless torrent.
This was a library, a place where a great deal of secret techniques was stored. There were martial art techniques as well as cultivation techniques.
Each and every of the secret techniques was wrapped up within a light sphere that remained afloat in midair as it fluttered about.
If one wished to acquire them, one would have to strike out and intercept them. Then, once they managed to seize it, they had to shake it to break the light sphere, and the secret technique that lay within would be theirs. Everyone could only enter once and stay for a day at most. After gaining a secret technique, regardless of whether the time was up or not, one would be delivered out. Ling Han was surprised as he said, "Isn't there an elite of the Shattering Void tier here? Why not just directly collect this entire library? Isn't that much simpler?"
How nice it would be if he could obtain the whole library in a single go. In that way, whatever techniques there were would all belong to him.
That person gave an exuberant laugh and remarked, "Youngsters, thankfully it is me that you asked, otherwise, others definitely would not know it." He then lowered his voice while adding on in a feigned mysterious manner, "Just so you know, this pavilion itself is precisely an array, yet in the event that the array is met with an attack, it will then destroy all the secret techniques that lie within." Understanding dawned on Ling Han in a flash. Try to forcefully obtain the library, and one would only end up not being able to obtain anything at all. Then, naturally, one could only play the game according to the rules. It was not that the elite of Shattering Void tier could not deal with this array, but rather that this array used the secret techniques as hostages, leaving the Shattering Void tier elite with no way around it as well. "Thank you." He nodded towards that person, and then turned to Xu Xian Air and the others.
"We shall go and try our luck too."
They squeezed through the throngs of people and entered the library. As soon as they set foot in the library, their expressions vividly revealed the astonishment they were feeling. This place was seemingly like a vast starry sky amid a pitch-black environment. There was a scatter of light specks dancing and swinging about, just like a sky full of meteors. Scrutinizing upon it carefully, it was precisely as that man from before had said. The secret techniques were wrapped up within light spheres, hovering in the skies all around. Of course, this was not a starry sky. At first glance the space was huge, but in fact, it was only a square 1 acre big, and its height was approximately 150 meters. For a cultivator, this sort of size and height was nothing short of just a leap. They could land wherever they wished. However, just as Ling Han was thinking to rise high into the air, he detected that there was a force forcing him down right away. He moved his body in a bounce, but his speed was in fact heavily hampered by the strong suppression. This greatly heightened the degree of difficulty in seizing the light sphere. Everyone had to abide by the rules here. One could choose not to comply or try to resist, but according to the impressive strength of the array here, probably even Heaven tier elites could only behave honestly. Shattering Void tier elites perhaps could break down such bonds, but the consequence would be the loss of all the secret techniques here. Ling Han didn't know who'd actually designed this library, but it was really quite a trick.
The probability of that person being Fatima was pretty high. After all, he had an extraordinarily great inclination and knack for mischief. Here, everyone could only advance at the pace of a normal person, and the height of one's leap was also not high. Hence, as far as the light spheres that filled the sky were concerned, it appeared that there was practically no feasible way. However, amidst the random motions of the light spheres as they danced about in the air, there were also rare occasions when they touched the ground, and they could still be captured.
This would then depend on luck because this place was actually quite expansive. If one did not keep a watchful eye in advance, when the light spheres flitted down, one would also not be in time to catch it. Ling Han swept in the direction of the light spheres in the air. Because the extent of the motions was too rapid, while their frequency was too close, he had a hard time getting a good look at the things within the light spheres, catching only a few words occasionally. For instance, Sunflower Demon, Cultivation Execution, and other such incomplete names, believed to be the names of these secret techniques. He called up the Eye of Truth, and used it to diligently capture the information that was displayed within these light spheres. Found it! After almost an hour later, Ling Han finally locked onto one of the light spheres. The name that manifested within it was Earth Overturning Seal.
Even if he possessed the Eye of Truth, it was also so difficult. He reckoned that others totally could not even make clear the situation. They struck out to grab as soon as they saw a light sphere flitting over. As for whether they managed to successfully grab their target or not, that was a different matter. This light sphere was now fluttering swiftly aloft. Ling Han tried to use the blood-sucking origin gold, but that thing's speed was too fast, and he simply could not catch up with it. No, there had to be a solution. Ling Han looked closely, no longer impulsively striking out for fear that he would accidentally latch onto other light spheres, after which he'd be sent out of the library.
"Ya Nyo caught one!" Hu Nyo delightedly cried out. Her luck was exceptionally good. One of the light spheres actually walked into the trap and floated down towards her body. That little girl naturally would not hold back and took that light sphere. The little girl was also immediately delivered out of the library. Ling Han withdrew his gaze and continued to fix his eyes on that light sphere with the Earth Overturning Seal wrapped within it.
After observing it for less than half a day, he finally discovered that, in fact, there was a sequence to the revolving motions of the light spheres.
It was just that the variations were incomparably complicated, so calculating them naturally would be beset with difficulties. The next drop point would be there. Ling Han immediately moved his body and ran in the direction of the place in accordance to his calculations. But he only made it halfway there when someone actually emerged ahead and blocked his path. "Make way!"
As Ling Han spoke out these words, slightly half of his body was winding around from the side of the other's body. After all, they did not know each other, and if he were to rashly charge forward, it was highly likely that he would be dealt a severe blow by the other. Shwa! His figure passed through, and ahead of him a light sphere was in the midst of descending swiftly, no more than 3 meters away from him.
This normally would just be in a split-second speed, yet now, Ling Han needed to run towards it in 3 steps.
"Humph, how dare you!"
That person was actually furious, and instantly drew out his saber and delivered a slash in Ling Han's direction. Xiu! The saber ray transformed into a drill that struck forth swiftly.
He was merely passing him. Moreover, he had already spoken out in advance, and did not even touch him, and yet he wanted to kill.
Ling Han did not move to parry the blow, for it'd be a waste of time, and directly used his body to forcefully take this blow.
He even did not have the energy to revolve the particles within his body to try to avoid injuries at all cost.
The saber ray slashed onto his body, releasing an aftershock that trembled through his body in its wake. Bloodstains could be seen tainting his back. Thankfully, it was only a minor wound, and the body of Diamond had automatically healed the wound.
He stretched out his hand in the direction of the swiftly descending light sphere, but the light sphere grazed through his fingers, rebounded from the ground, and returned back to the sky once again.
Fuck!
Ling Han was swearing in his heart. It was clearly because he was slashed by the other that he missed, short by a mere hair's breadth difference at that.
Damn him! Hee hee, youngster, this is a lesson for you. Next time don't be so impulsive. The person who delivered that slash spoke from behind Ling Han, his words filled with delight at Ling Han's predicament.
Earlier, he slashed for he, firstly, indeed felt annoyed, and secondly, when he chanced upon the light sphere descending towards the direction that Ling Han was precisely rushing to, He was immediately filled with envy.
If I could not get it, why should I let you get it?
Such a trifling spiritual infant tier junior. He naturally had nothing to fear from him given he was at the peak of the deity transformation tier and his battle prowess had exceeded 9 battle stars. How could it be that this little junior still dared to retaliate against him in a bid to even the score? Ling Han did really feel like killing someone, but when his gaze swept across the light spheres in the sky, he actually forcibly held back the urge. He had to start afresh to seek it out, then lock onto that light sphere and calculate when would be the next time it was going to descend and where was the location it would land at. There was only a day's time, and according to the sequence from before, it appeared he only had one last chance left. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.